Well, hello and welcome along to another edition of the Andrew Eborn Show with me, Andrew Eborn, and I'm delighted to welcome the fabulous Chris de BURGH. How are you doing, Chris?
Hello, Andrew. You're looking extremely dapper, and I'm impressed by the stuff in the background. There seems to be a Mayan temple or something, and a chess set up, which reminds me a little bit of one of my early albums called Best Moves, which had a picture of me playing chess with myself, a bit like the song Spanish Train that I wrote about the duel between God and the devil. And although I have been able to play chess, I've completely forgotten how to do it now. But I had somebody set it up so the devil is looking up and he's about to do a move that is checkmate. And so I'm wondering, are you in the middle of a game there? Or
Oh,
is
no,
it...
it was, and it was deliberately because I've been researching. I'm the world's expert now on Chris de BURGH, going back generations of the de BURGH family. So I thought I'd have the reference to chess and reference to that album, but also the Tower of Babel behind me because that dates back. And the talking about that sort of stuff, which is glorious. And you, I mean, it's a joy to have you on the show because it's 35 years, can you believe, since Lady in Red. There are very few, I know, amazing, isn't it? There are very few artists who can talk about half a century of success out there in the world, 50 million records around the world, zillions of countries, one of the busiest performers I know, and boy, do I know a few performers. Lockdown for you, Chris, how on earth have you coped?
You know, I don't want to say it's been any different to anybody else, to be perfectly honest, Andrew. I live in a beautiful part of the world in the Wicklow Hills of Ireland. And I suppose impacting on me has been the fact that I haven't been able to perform. I made a note the other day, actually, when I was talking to a friend. Up to today, it's about 580 days, 580, since I was actually last on the stage, which was at the end of a long European tour. I think actually more than Europe. We did 68 shows in 12 different countries. But that was in Antwerp just before Christmas 2019. And you know, I'm a very positive person, so I'm kind of upbeat. A lot of things have happened. Obviously, I put together an album we are going to discuss. And my daughter, Rosanna, who was Miss World back in 2003, completely out of the blue. If you've done your research, you know all about that.
Absolutely.
But she, and I'm not talking out of turn here, but she had multiple miscarriages when she wanted to start a family, to the point where she had to have surgery and was told that she could never carry her own child. And that was a devastating blow, as you can imagine. So she and her husband went through the long route of surrogacy and have their own genetic child, Sophia, who's now a year and a half, a year and 7 months, who's an absolute delight. She's gorgeous. And, you know, she runs around in the same little dresses that her mummy used to run around in.
Right.
So it's such a huge thing for a grandfather. But last year, in about May or June, she announced that she was actually pregnant this time. The babies stayed, didn't miscarry, and carried through. And it wasn't just one baby, it was two, and even more, it was identical twins. So we have now Hugo and Oscar on the planet, and they're delightful little lads, and we see a lot of them. So that kind of really made a big difference during my personal lockdown. I have been very busy keeping in touch with fans on my Facebook page. I've recorded about 40 or 50 songs for people to watch. And I also have been, even today, I was practicing a song to send to somebody whose father-in-law passed away. And I do these. Yesterday, I did a song for a couple in, where were they now? Australia.
Right.
I think Perth, Western Australia, about to celebrate their 80th birthday together. And so I just do these things. They're a bit of fun, and you know, it keeps me interested. But there's plenty to do. I live in a big house here, so there's lots
Oh,
to
no,
do
it's a
here.
glorious house. Oh, it's on the market, your house as well now, isn't it? Are you still going to sell it?
The cool 12.5. That's
Oh, well,
Europe.
I've been saving up. It's my birthday in a couple of days' time. Well, tomorrow, actually, 7th of July. That's that sort of thing. So anybody looking for a present, knock on Chris's door. It's got to be good. You're right. I mean, the great thing about your daughter, and you have a wonderful family, one of your best productions ever, is she's so open about it and helping a lot of people. She talked about her own challenges in conceiving, as you say. And for her, one of the positive things about lockdown, she was saying that the reason she might have naturally got pregnant this time was because of all the stress and strains that weren't there anymore.
Well, you know, it's a strange thing, Andrew, because when I'm on tour, one thing that I live with and not on, but that's an important distinction, is adrenaline. And I always feel that adrenaline is like a wave coming towards you. You can either ride it all the way to the shore,
Right.
or you can allow it to crush you. So people, for example, who get incredibly nervous about public speaking or being on stage, they're allowing the wave to crush them. And for me, it's adrenaline is a positive force if you can use it to your benefit. And when I this last year and a half, without having it in my body, I mean, I do a couple of things that do require it, and I can really feel it. It's like, whoa, this is happening. And I think it's the same thing with the lack of stress. You know, for my daughter, she obviously was in a situation with the new baby, that would have been the little girl Sophia. And I understand that also brings on maternal hormones. And the whole, for me, it's a miracle. I think the whole damn thing is a miracle. The fact you and I even talking to each other is a miracle, because we are, you know, the strong ones who survived. And the whole thing is miraculous. And during the lockdown, I, I actually, you know what, Andrew, I didn't write one song during the lockdown, because I tend to write to order, i.e., if I've got an album project, I'll write to that and then I'll finish that. And then occasionally the mood will hit me. But during these times when everybody has been undergoing, I suppose you call low level stress, low level anxiety, it's there, you know. And I don't know about your dreams, but my dreams tend to be fairly strange from time to time. And they almost always recently involved restaurants, concerts, um, trying to get to the venue if I'm anxious about something, you know, this kind of stuff.
Oh, no, it's always, well, for me, it's that sort of thing they say about dreams. If you're being chased, then there's obviously some sort of problem that you have to catch up with you. It's that eternal fight of good and evil, which I know populates a lot of your songs as well. And people always say that dreams are basically your mind trying to sort out the things of the day, put them into little cubby holes, isn't it? So any moment that might have sort of sparked a little bit of interest is just your brain trying to compartmentalize it.
And I think it's kind of resetting, which is a great idea. You know, all the stuff that we thought about during the day. I mean, I can tell you right now, what's been on my mind for the last few days is I've been offered a show in Mallorca
Right.
at the end of this month. And our little country here in Ireland, struggling like everywhere else, but it's the only one of the 27 European Union countries that has not come out with the COVID passport on July 1st. And it's a real thing. It's a problem, because with that, if you're doubly vaccinated, which I am, boing, boing, I had the Pfizer vaccine. And if you're doubly vaccinated, then you can travel freely as long as you can provide evidence of the vaccines.
Right.
And here in Ireland, you can't do that until allegedly the 19th of July. And even then, they're talking about that date may not be possible. So, oh my God, I got to get a PCR test 72 hours before, 48 hours before. Do you know what? You almost have to have a medical dictionary beside you saying, what is all these things, IPVs and CBDs and BBCs and...
Well, I tell you the other extraordinary thing, Chris, is that everybody in a pandemic has become an expert, haven't they? It's rather like before Brexit, everybody was a thing about constitution. They could tell you what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. Everybody, but everybody, especially on social media, has become an expert on viruses and things like that, haven't they?
Absolutely. And I actually think what they did, was it Greenland or Iceland? I think it was Iceland. They decided to leave the whole thing to scientists. Right? You guys are the scientists, we're the politicians. We will act on your advice exclusively, but we will not put our opinions into the mix. And of course, they dealt with it extremely well. The moment you get politicians, and I believe you're calling me from the UK, and I follow the UK with great interest. I used to live there for many years in London, and in my early years, starting off, you know, living on people's sofas and stuff. So I've been all over the place: Wimbledon, Chelsea, South Wimbledon, North London, everywhere. But the thing is, if I believe the scientists and people who come up with the anti-vax, which they're entitled to their opinion, obviously, they should just reflect. Have they ever, for example, unfortunately caught polio? Have they ever had smallpox? Have they had any number of dozens of Ebola? No, they haven't. It's because of vaccination. So it's as simple as that. This thing is working.
And you're absolutely right. And the other thing, and it's a theme also in your writing, is about history, and having studied that as part of your course at Trinity, is that history does repeat itself. It's not the first time in history we've had a pandemic. I mean, even as recently as 1918, the wrongly named, and it was wrongly named, Spanish flu. And you see that we're following similar patterns, aren't we?
We are, and if you look at a lot of those countries in the Far East who were used to wearing masks and SARS and stuff. In fact, the last time I was on a flight, and usually every year I'm doing about 100 flights minimum, all over the place. And last time I was in Heathrow right after I finished recording my album at Peter Gabriel's studio there in near Bath. It was the 15th of February, and already this thing was coming in. Everybody knew there was something nasty on the way. And I had, it was rather pathetic actually, but I had a mask. It's the kind of thing plasterers use, you know. But it was a mask nevertheless. And I walked around Heathrow, a lot of people, hundreds, thousands of people there. And they were looking at me oddly. I only saw 6 other people, I think it was, and they were of an Eastern European origin, and they were wearing masks. They were used to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were looking at me with this thing, and what are you doing that for? And I just thought, no, you've got to protect yourself and others, of course.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. Listen to the scientists rather than those who are just the spin doctors, if you like. It's always, we're a nation, a world governed by people out there with the sound bites, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking to history. It's not just the pandemic, I think, that has brought us into the historical context. It's just everything. What is it about human beings we don't learn? Is it because the next generation do not want to be told from the previous generation? You know, that lovely song, The Living Years, which I recorded as well by Michael McCann. Every generation blames the one before, and all the frustrations come beating at your door. It's the kind of thing, it's the constant. I think it's a very exciting thing to be a human being, because if there's a crisis, the way we react, it's like the global warming thing. This is a disaster on the way. But I do believe that when we human beings are pushed to the point of coming up with an alternative, we can. But only when we're pushed to the point we absolutely have to. Otherwise, the status quo remains.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. And the other point that you make in your writing, and lots of brilliant comments that you make on society, is that we are effectively all the same. If you prick me, do I not bleed? If you tickle me, do I not laugh? And I think whether you're the Pope or a poor boy, you deserve respect, don't you?
Yes, I think you picked up there on a comment that I made, that every single child that is born is as valuable as every other. And that is one of the tenets, incidentally, of the Robin Hood story, because this guy was born, I mean, if you've seen the movies, it depends who you saw, but one of them made me smile. Hi, I'm Robin of Locksley. Just, come on. So he didn't change his accent. This is Kevin Costner. But, you know, we're talking about Black Lives Matter and all that. When a child is born, he has no clue. All he sees is what he sees with his eyes. It's only when he begins to see a mirror, or he feels the prejudices going on around him because of the color of his skin or his accent, all those things, that we develop as adults and put into the children's minds. Before that, we're all absolutely equal. And I have said that before, that the child who was born in Mumbai is as valuable a life as the Pope's life or anybody's life. It's very important.
I think that's absolutely, and it's worth reminding people of that. And the great lyrics that you write coming out of that makes a lot of sense as well. And talking about history, I mean, history was obviously one of your majors at Trinity, but the de Burghs, and I've been looking into the de Burgh family, going back all the way to William the Conqueror, one of your half-brothers, ancestors, I think. He was a half-brother of William the Conqueror.
Yeah, well, actually, when Rosanna was asked to do a program called Who Do You Think You Are?
Yeah.
Amongst other things, she was taken to BURGH and stood in front of the tapestry, and there's this awning over a chap sitting on a throne, and to the left and the right were 2 other men. And in the front of the camera, she was asked, now, who are these people? I have no idea. Excuse me. The one in the middle is William the Conqueror. The one on the left, his left, was Bishop Odo of Bayeux, who commissioned the tapestry. Yeah. And on his right was Robert, Duke of Normandy. They were all half brothers and brothers, but they all shared the same mother, Miss de Burgh.
Right. Wonderful.
Yeah, Arletta de Burgh. from Normandy. So you see, if you have a nose like this, you see, you really have the Norman style. It's still there.
The Norman conch, is that what they call it, rather than the conqueror?
Norman conch. The thing is, it actually doesn't make us any different.
Yeah.
It's possibly way back in the DNA. And another curiosity, I know I keep on mentioning the album, but one of the things that happened to me about 4 years ago is these two lads from a place called Fulda, which is in the center of Germany, contacted me through the office and said, would I be interested in a project, a musical project about Robin Hood? So they'd done their research extremely well, including the fact they knew I was brought up in a Norman castle, that I had that background you just referred to. And one of my ancestors featured in a play by William Shakespeare called King John. And his name is Hubert de Burgh. And Hubert has been a family name ever since. In fact, my eldest son is called Hubie, as in Hubert, And he was very nervous about that name for a while, because people say, what? But he is a Hubie, there's no question, like his cousin Hubie. And Hubert de Burgh was the chief justiciar, the chief lawmaker to King Richard the Lionheart, and also subsequently King John, and the guy that came afterwards, who is completely forgotten who it is, so much for history. Willie Harry C. So when they approached me with this project, they knew that I was interested in medieval history. I'd had an album called Crusader, and they'd already performed and written 8 successful musicals. So the idea was a no-brainer for me. That's why I got into the idea. But history is fascinating.
No, it's absolutely incredible, and what I love about it as well, looking at the Robin Hood, and we've just had a little flavour of live life, live well, which I love. I mean, there's glorious lines in that. Love in spite of the dangers, we keep jumping in. You know, I love that sort of stuff. And the only way to start is by loving yourself. I mean, all of these really great feel about it. But you're, rather than letting the truth stand in the way of a good story with Robin Hood, because there's so much myth surrounding the man, isn't there? You approach the story slightly differently. Tell me about that.
Well, nobody knows if the guy even existed.
Yeah.
So what happened was, during the writing for the musical, I had numerous meetings with the lyricists, the librettists, and writing the music. And we came up with the story, which is, there's no point going through it right now, but it's a very fascinating story. But as I was doing this, I thought, right, I've already contributed 8 songs to the musical. Why not go the whole way and do my own album, creating my own story? And so I recorded 22 songs. 22 songs, my God, that's a lot. What was I thinking? But during a lot of them, there's a narrator called the storyteller, who keep coming back to, and then he narrates the next bit of the story. But the Robin Hood thing, if you stop 100 people in the street, Robin Hood, they'll say, stole from the rich, gave to the poor. Fair enough. Maid Marian, and then you might have Friar Tuck, you might have Little John, or those kind of things. The Sheriff of Nottingham, the bad guy. You always have to have a bad guy. So I looked at this with great interest, and because I love stories, and that takes me all the way back to probably an important moment in my writing career, when I wrote a song about God and the devil having a game of cards called Spanish Train, where I drew from sources like Milton's Paradise Lost, when the Satan, actually this reminds me of an interesting parallel, which I'll get to in a second, but imagine he was, Satan was a good guy, he was up there, an angel, but he went very nasty and so, and he got thrown out, and he just descended into hell, and he's lying there in Milton's poem, staring up at heaven and going, I'm gonna get back there, I want to growl, which reminds me of a certain politician who keeps claiming that the election was rigged, but enough of that. I'm gonna...
my combination of my red tie and the dark suit that might have helped as well, Chris. It's got to be good. Are there subtle clues here somewhere?
Depends how long the tie is, I suppose.
It goes on forever. Absolutely.
Okay, well, we don't want to get libeled. So the idea of Spanish Train, the story, I found that when I was doing concerts, particularly as a solo artist, which is a pretty horrible job to do, people are booing at you and shouting and so on. It's tough. It's a tough way to start your career, but it gives you a tough back as well. I found that a good story grips people.
Yeah.
And that song in particular, which is still a perennial, I thought, now I'll go to the Robin Hood story and do the same thing and create a story that once you've got into it, it's like anything. If you listen to a story or which is wonderful, if you ever see small children listening to somebody telling a story, they're not actually looking at the storyteller. They're kind of going like this.
Right.
All happening in the imagination, which I love that idea. And that's what I did with the Robin Hood. In addition, which I find for me really exciting, I decided last year to write a long form book
Right.
to go with the album, which means that there's 9 chapters with a prologue, and it fleshes out what's actually on the album. Because what a songwriter, what you're trying to do is to condense a long idea into a small idea, and make that accessible as a lyric. But I thought, why not do the long form stories? So a couple of weeks ago, my long-term friend and producer, Chris Porter, we've done 10 albums together,
yes,
came over and sat actually where I am right now. And he recorded me speaking the story, which is rather good news. And then we put in lots of music just to sort of bind it together. It kind of starts off, come away with me on a journey into the past, long before medieval days. I mean, it's that kind of stuff. And I'm very excited by that. So that will come out as well,
right.
In certain ways to accompany the musical album. Just a thought.
I know, it's brilliant. And there's a tour on it as well. You're going to be doing Robin Hood together with all the greatest hits as well. You must be longing to get back on the road again, aren't you?
Absolutely. When you spoke about a little song a few minutes ago, I just happen to have a guitar here.
Ah!
Why not give you a burst of the odd song or two? Hang on a second. You asked me a little bit ago about a song, which is the current first single, called Live Life, Live Well. And I have absolutely no idea where this came from. It just, bing. Sometimes songs are like seeds that drop into the soil. They just blow in the wind, and after a while, something grows. Other songs are ideas that I've had that I really want to put into a song. I did a song recently called The Keeper of the Keys, which was about men's authority, particularly using religion as an excuse, authority over women, telling them what to do, how to walk, what to eat, what to wear, all that kind of stuff, which is so wrong. However, Live Life, Live Well just emerged. So I'll give you a couple of bars of it. Hang on a second. Oh, what about the second bit? Yeah, okay. I am looking for love, said the man that I know, but I have been there before. Love is an ocean where we sink or we swim. In spite of the dangers, we keep jumping in. So I told him, my friend, there are no guarantees how things will work out in the end. One day she'll tell you you're the love of her life, but take it from me, that can change overnight. Oh, don't worry, everything will be fine when you just live life, live well. Take your time, look after yourself, give love, give well. The only way to get there is to start by loving yourself. The only way to get there is to start by loving yourself.
Oh, come on. This is beautiful. I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to do all of your albums. We'll just stay here forever until you do your next concert.
Oh my God. You know how many songs I've written? I think I've written about 320 songs. So we're going to be a while, folks.
Yeah, I know, it's great. I'll be here. I say it's my birthday, so we're celebrating stuff. Tell them you won't take it anymore. There's such great lines in this. We talk about the Keeper of the Keys and things like that. Some really, really powerful lines in your song as a writer and so on and so forth. But we all sort of touch on the basis. Robin Hood's going to be absolutely brilliant. You had, obviously, it wasn't the first time you've done a story based on an album based on a book. You obviously had Moonfleet as well, I think in 2010, didn't you? Glorious story of swashbuckling pirates and things like that. How did that one come about? Was that just a book you just loved from your childhood?
Absolutely. It was a childhood story that I've read numerous times, countless times. And that came about because I think I got sick of that format of an album of 10 or 12 songs, each one about 3 to 4 minutes to work with radio. And I've been playing with the idea quite a long time. You mentioned Lady in Red 35 years ago. That was from the album Into the Light. And at the end of that, there's a bit called The Leader, The Vision, What About Me? And that was a piece about 8 or 9 minutes long in 3 sections. So I've always been interested in the longer form. But this one, I think somebody said to me, why didn't you write an album around it? I thought, what a bloody good idea. So I came up with the music. And I remember I had this huge chart saying what happened next. And we have young John Trenchard in the Cornish village waking up, looking out, and he sees a light down by the bay. And he's being told it's the ghost of Blackbeard to keep people away, obviously. But it's, in fact, smugglers bringing stuff in. And it is one of the best fit books. And I know it's been serialized for the BBC, and it's also been filmed. And it was written in the late 1800s.
1898, John Milled Faulkner. Absolutely. There you go. Start for 10. It's going to be good.
Start for 10. What a guy. You've been up burning the candle at both ends. Learning.
Oh, I'll tell you what, since lockdown, that's all I've done. I've become the world expert. This will be my appropriate mastermind subject with Chris de Burgh and the family going all the way back to William the Conqueror. That'll be the title.
Poor fella. What a dull existence you've been leading. So, but the Moonfleet thing was fantastic because not only did I adore the story, but I could refer to the story any time that I have having a struggle with the lyric or the idea, because I see things very filmically. For example, Don't Pay the Ferryman, I had this incredible, extraordinary idea of a guy, if you just follow the camera, there's this guy coming from left to right, and there's trees, and he's along a muddy track, and his cloak is billowing behind him, and the camera tracks him along, the moon going between the trees, and suddenly he cuts to the edge of a just a precipice, and the horse rears like that and looks down, and then a long way below you can see this river, the sparkling moon on the top, and this is his point of destiny. So he goes down and he sees the boatman Charon. You've got to put the coins on the eyes of the dead. And he's about to get on board, and he hears this voice, don't do it, don't do it. You must pay me now. But no. And so they go across the river, and then as the thunder and the lightning, and I can see the skeletons dancing on the water, and the boatman says, you've got to pay me now. And they're like, no, don't pay me. And then it kind of, we don't know what happened. So for me, it was a film about nothing in particular except destiny, a point of destiny, and that kind of thing. But for the Robin Hood story, I did not have that point of reference. All I could do is go back to my own ideas and story, which I only wrote the story a long time after I finished the album. So, but the Moonfleet thing was wonderful. I mean, it was a childhood love.
Yeah. And fantastic. And I think, talking about the childhood, it was Aristotle who said, show me a child, or give me a child until the age of 7, and I'll show you the man. I mean, talking about your glorious history, and somebody who studied history, the wonderful de Burghs going all the way back to the Crusaders, and a bit of Robin Hood thrown in for good measure as well. Tell me about your childhood, because you grew up originally, you were over in Argentina, you were born over there. Do you remember much about those days?
Not a lot. I was born there mainly because my mother was there at the time. Think about it.
Yes. It's always strange that, Chris. This is breaking news. This will be a headline news. I was born in Argentina because my mother was there.
Exactly. But it was going back to my father's family back in the mid to late 1800s. They were originally from Sheffield, and then they moved to Australia, and then across to Argentina because it's some of the finest land in the world.
Yeah.
And in Argentina, particularly outside Buenos Aires, and where I was born was a place called Venado Tuerto, which is about 200 kilometers northwest of Buenos Aires. And that is an area of terrifically fertile land. and a lot of people from England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland settled there. And I remember that lovely man, Simon, who was severely injured in HMS.
So in Westwood?
Uh, it was during the Falklands War.
Yeah, Westwood, I think, yeah.
Simon Weston, exactly. And him telling the story about when he was fighting down there. He's from Wales, and he would shout things in Welsh, and the conscripts on the other side would shout back in Welsh. The Argentine conscripts, because they were from Welsh background.
Right.
So my father's family moved there and bought an estancia of several hundred, about 1,000 hectares. And that's where my father was at the outbreak of the Second World War. He volunteered, and then he spent 4 years behind the Japanese lines in Burma, which must have been absolutely horrific. Survived that, and then met my mother and went back to Argentina. So in answer to the question, I don't remember a lot about it, but I remember that the heat of Argentina, and I would have been speaking Spanish as my first language, pretty to the point where I was able to speak it very fluently in my later years, because I studied it in Trinity as well. I can't remember a word now, except "yo soy nacido en Argentina."
But you say it so well, Chris. This is what I love about your accents and your storytelling are just superb. But you went to Malta, you went to Nigeria, you spent some time in Africa, and looking at that sort of side, obviously with the farming interest. I think your father leased out his farm, didn't he? And he got involved with a different business on the manufacturing side. What was the reason for that transition? Was it because the economy was so difficult? Was it difficult to manage in Argentina at that stage?
It was post-war. There wasn't much going on. It was a difficult time in agriculture down there. And he was offered a job then in Nigeria and subsequently in Zaire. And it was just so difficult for early 50s. In fact, one of his early things was following a debacle involving Kim Philby, the spy, when a lot of Albanian youngsters, young men were dropped into Albania. They were trying to prevent a communist regime taking over. They were all caught and executed. My father was put in charge of a second attempt to prevent that happening. And that's why we were in Malta, and he was teaching people small arms and hand-to-hand combat and stuff like that, under the direct supervision of Earl Mountbatten. And that operation was also compromised by the same man. It was incredible that MI5 or MI6, whoever it was, didn't realize the same person was involved with both projects, and both of them were disastrous. But anyway, following that, then it was the move to Africa. And I remember going to Africa in my summer months, and it was wonderful, the heat and the swimming and playing with children of all hues and colors. It made no difference. If you're a child, it makes no difference. Playing tennis and then going back to school up here in Ireland.
I know you were at boarding school. You were at boarding school at quite a young age, weren't you?
Yes. Well, now, if anybody is tempted to send their little children to boarding school beyond, at least up to the age of 12, after puberty kicks in, it's a different thing. But I think now it's inhumane to send a little child. If you have children, if you're watching and you've got a 6 or 7-year-old, 8-year-old, imagine going to bed and not being able to give that child a cuddle. And in the dormitories at night, there were all these children crying themselves to sleep. And it was a brutal regime. We were all supposed to go out there and be soldiers of the empire. It was boys only, a Protestant ethos here, very close to where I am right now, curiously enough. And it was not comfortable. And the bizarre thing is, Andrew, many, many years later, when my children started going to the same school, which had relocated to a big old building that looked like Hogwarts, it was about to financially collapse, and I stepped in and basically bought the place, eroded the debts, built 7 new classrooms, and it did very well until it financially collapsed about 4 years ago, which was very sad. But it was the same place. But yeah, boarding school is not midnight feasts and great fun, and for little children, it's not. It's
Oh,
very
it's
disappointing.
terrifying. I mean, Tom Brown's school days with all the bullying and the and all that sort of stuff, and it's tough. I mean, I went to boarding school, but I was 13, as you say. It's slightly different when you're older. But going at the age of 8, Chris, I mean, that must have had a massive impact. And what was your most horrendous moment during those early days?
I think I was just 7 when I went the first, and then it would have been my 8th birthday. The hardest thing was the holidays, funnily enough, where there was 2 weeks at Christmas and 2 weeks at Easter, and then 2 months in the summer. But the 2 weeks at Christmas and Easter, my elder brother and I would then be farmed out to people just to take children for those periods, because my grandfather could put up with us for a while, General Sir Eric de Burgh. But having 2 rambunctious lads running around the household, for 2 weeks was a bit beyond him on occasion. But that was tough. And then seeing your parents once or twice a year. I'm not going to come up with a sob story, to be honest, but it makes you, and for a long time, I was the smallest guy in the school, and there was bullying. And a bit like the early years on tour, it just makes a man of you. I didn't want to be made a man of when I was 8 years old or 9 years old, yeah. But it comes to you, and it gives you an inner strength and inner core.
Possibly, you were just on the cusp because you were sort of late. Well, 7, I guess the school term was in September. You would have turned 8 in 15th of October, wouldn't you? So it's that sort of early sort of period. But it's still tough, isn't it? But there were adventures in that sort of stage because your father and mother, they invested in this glorious castle in Ireland. Tell me about BURGH Castle.
Right. Well, this was about 1960, long before you even dreamed about, Andrew. And
you're too kind. You're too kind. It's going to be good.
That's why I wear glasses, so I can see.
I know, it's going to be...
Actually, it reminds me of the 3 ages of man. It's childhood, middle age, and gosh, you're looking well. Like
that. Yes, it's jam for supper tonight. It's going to be good.
Will there be still honey for tea? My grandfather I think he was getting lonely in his house up near Dublin. And he said to my mum, look, if I find a place, can I come and live with you for the rest of my days? So he saw this castle for sale, BURGH Castle, with 170 acres, and contacted my mother and father. My father, for some bizarre reason, always wanted to live in a castle because he was very good with his hands. He wanted to build stuff. So we moved in at Christmas, and it was incredibly cold. There was no heat, no furniture, no light. And no water. So you had to pump for 20 minutes to get a bucket of water down in the basement. But if you're 12 years old, very exciting, and all sorts of things. And during the summer months subsequently, about 2 or 3 years later, we opened up as a hotel. And that is where it all began for me, because by this time I was, 15, and the Beatles were huge. And there were songs like this, which I could not play then, but I can play a bit now. I'll give you a burst of it. But in the evenings, there was absolutely nothing going on for the 50 or so guests. So this little guy would pull out his guitar and sing a song or two. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Too much of that one, but there you go. That was the kind
and that was the 3rd best songwriter in the Beatles, as they say. And it's extraordinary. It is. But wonderful, wonderful stuff, and that sort of diversity. But taking you back to when you were 12, there's an extraordinary story that I managed to dig out in this one here about boys find explosives in an Irish castle. Tell me about that and the extraordinary circumstances that led to your being lowered down by your father. What was the story?
Well, the tower itself is 12th century, obviously rebuilt in the 15th century, and there's a lot of the left and right. And when we were investigating, my dad came up one day and he said, I've been banging on the floor and I think it's hollow. So he banged through, and then there was what subsequently turned out to be a priest's hole, during the time when the priests were being executed and trapped and stuff. And so I went down as the smaller boy, and my brother up stairs, or was it the other way? I can't remember which way around. But anyway, one of us passed up to the other this package, which was extremely dry and dusty. And on the way up, one of us gave it a bit of a bang just to get the dust off. Gave it to my dad. Of course, he was an expert in explosives. And he went, "Holy shit, this is gelignite." And luckily it was dry, because I understand if it starts to sweat, then it's very, very explosive. So he called the police and the army came up, and they put it in a field nearby and blew it up. And it went up with a mighty bang and a huge hole in the ground. It was probably left there years before by a member of the IRA or somebody. That was definitely hidden. It wasn't for normal purposes.
But that's what I find extraordinary, because it says in this press report, and you don't always believe what you did on that sort of thing. They basically were lowered through this hole, and you basically you came up with this in your hand. So if you dropped the whole thing, I wouldn't be talking to you today.
I think the tower would have gone first and me up right after it.
It's quite an extra. But you remember that day very clearly, I imagine.
Oh yes, very clearly. But when you're growing up in a place like that, you become aware of strange phenomena, and I'm pretty sure there were poltergeists doing bits and pieces, smashing things. But all in all, it was an extraordinary childhood. During the months when I was back from school at Marlborough College, and in the summer it was beautiful, because all these people would come. A lot of people from England, and they book the same families each year, 2 or 3 weeks together, so they could all come together. And it was bliss, and we used to play volleyball and cricket, and I'd sing the songs, like "Oh, my man's a dustman, where did the dustman's at?" Remember that one?
Of course, Lonnie Donegan, and that was recorded.
He's a banana with his great big hobnail boots. He's got such a shop to pull them up that he calls them daisy roads. Oh my, all that kind of stuff. And there was Bob Dylan, how many roads must a man walk down? So before I even stood on a proper stage, I'd done hundreds and hundreds of these living room concerts, which gives you tremendous background.
Oh no, tremendous! Well, Lonnie Donegan recorded it just around the corner from. I'm very close to the BBC at Portland Place, and that's where he recorded "My Old Man's a Dustman." It's really, really close. And it's those sort of iconic songs. It's rather like Chuck Berry and "My Ding-a-Ling" and that sort of stuff, and the stripper. There are certain songs. As a performer, you always have to perform. How do you feel when you play those sort of songs, Patricia the Stripper?
Well, I have to tell you, Andrew, about the world premiere of Patricia the Stripper. Rather sad story, because I was writing stuff there, which were stories. I mean, I wrote one called "Star Spangled Tangerine See-Through Topless Trousers," which I remember very little of. And then there was
Is that what you were wearing at the time, Chris?
Hot Barrel Hannah. She had a smile that she was the kind of girl who could make a horseshoe curl every time that she smiled. I mean, these are ridiculous stuff. But this one day, at this time, I'd finished in Trinity, and I decided to try and make an effort, a career in the music industry. Knew nothing about it. My parents knew nothing about it. They said, "Why don't you get a proper job?" And I said, "Well, I want to give this thing a try." And I was living in London, staying with people, and they were very good to me, I have to say. And one day I was invited to go off to a very smart la-di-da place in Norfolk somewhere, and it was a very posh weekend. And lots of people, I say, "Well, fancy a game of tennis, old boy, a glass of port after dinner," all this stuff. And I was asked, did I want to go fly fishing? You probably know the story, but I still can remember the humiliation of it, because I'd done a lot of coarse fishing for bass and mullet and sort of mackerel around the seas around South Wexford, but not fly fishing. So we went out early one morning, a few of us. I stood on the bank and I threw the fly, which immediately got caught in the tree. And I thought, oh no. So I stepped onto what I thought was dry bank to pull the thing out. And of course I went up to my neck in mud. I was just, I had to crawl out. And it's awful. So I climbed into my car, uh, some kind of a car, I went back and I went straight into the bath with all my clothes on to try and get rid of them. Anyway, the story is when I was flying back, I was thinking about this and I was thinking about that weekend. And I thought this kind of start a song going, Dennis is a menace with his, anyone for tennis? And beseeching me to come and keep the score. And Maud says, oh Lord, I'm so terribly bored. And I really can't stand it anymore. And that turned into Patricia the stripper, this guy imagining that he was at one of those parties. All he wanted to do was get away downtown to a bar, local town, where the strippers were. And we had this very nice Welsh chef working at the castle who very sadly passed away. And his two brothers showed up. They drove over, took the ferry to take his remains home and so on. And they came to tea at the castle. And they were both very somber, dressed in black, as you can imagine. And my mother said, sing something to cheer them up. So I went in, we invited them into the dining room, the banqueting hall. And I sat at the end and I said, I've got a song I've just written, this might cheer you up. And with a sweep of her hips, she started a strip to tremendous applause. She took off her drawers. And I looked at them, and at the end of it, there was nothing. There was no response whatsoever. They just looked at me and I looked at them and I went, okay, that didn't go down too well.
I love it. To tremendous applause, she took off her drawers. I mean, come on. What I love about you, Chris, is you're such a versatile writer. You could do the very meaningful ones and very, very powerful songs, but incredible ballads. And it's rather what they say about the Bee Gees. I mean, you can provide the soundtrack to people's lives effectively, because that is human nature, isn't it? We go on a roller coaster of emotion, and you have to laugh at it yourself, and you have to cry, you have to have those sort of things. But I mean, Trinity College, when you were first starting, you were talking about it being quite tough. I mean, you used to get a job, I mean, as you say, your mother, her mother, were particularly fierce, I think, and she didn't approve of people in the music business, did she?
Well, I never, unfortunately, she died in childbirth when my mother was quite young, but so I never got her opinion. But it was generally, you only go into show business if you've got nothing else to do with your life. Because there was so many generals and admirals of the fleet. There was the de Burghs, and then the very close to them family was de Robecks, who were, I mean, serious military people, and the odd bishop here and there. So to wind up in this business was a very aberrations, should I say.
It's interesting at family gatherings, isn't it? And I saw your This Is Your Life program, and they all came out, and Richard was there saying you stole his first guitar. Is that true?
Probably. It was a crappy guitar, so I'm glad.
They said you could play it better than him. What do you play now? What's your favorite guitar to play?
This is a Takamine 12-string acoustic guitar, and on stage I have several hard body electric acoustic guitars which make an incredible noise. I remember one time I was in front of the Brandenburg Gate to 180,000 people, and I did one chord and it went all the way down. Very exciting stuff. So yeah, and I taught myself to play the guitar. You know, if you put one finger there and one chords, and subsequently also to play the piano, because if you know that is a C and that is so and so, then you can work out the chords in the piano. The white notes are very simple. If you stay two fingers apart, you go do 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 do. You go on the key of C. But the moment you put the black notes in, all the sharps and stuff, that becomes complicated. So I enjoy playing the piano. I like playing the piano.
Oh, it's very good. And as you say, wasn't it the American Guitar Company or something? Are they still in business?
Who?
The American Guitar Company. Are they the Guitar Factory, isn't it, I think?
Guitar Factory. No, yeah. That happened because I had a guitar tech called Phil from Ireland, who was over for some reason at the 1994 American Football World Cup. Was it 1990? It must have been about then. And it was in the States, that's right. Italian 90 must have been 94. And he was in Florida, and he was in a football stadium well before the match. He was just doing some work there, and he heard one of my songs being played across the PA. Very curious, so he found out who this was. And it turned out that these two guys who were big fans, who were getting ready to play stuff for the football match that night. And they were guitar makers. And he said, well, I'm a guitar tech for Chris. And so they actually made the first guitar for me and brought it, hand carried it across the Atlantic and gave it to me. Astonishing guitars. And I think subsequently Sting had some, Clapton, a few, but they're not in business anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So make sure you had enough stock of it. I mean, it is a shame when you get brilliant craftspeople and they go out of business. It's really tough, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I'm a great lover of antiques, for example, and I love antique rugs. I have a collection of Persian rugs, quite, well over 100 years old. And seeing the craftsmanship that goes into that, and seeing an antique piece of furniture, funnily enough, songwriting is a bit like creating a piece of furniture. I mean, my first song was awful. It was called A Waste of Love, a waste of time, basically. But you learn, anybody can whack together a chair and a table, right? But to create something that's going to be durable takes a huge amount of skill. And that's why I admire these. We always watch, my wife and I, Antiques Roadshow and Antiques Road Trip and stuff. And just finding stuff that these craftsmen from the 1800s, 1700s, whatever, have created. They're beautiful things, and they are things for the future as well as the past.
And you're right, that sort of craftsmanship, I mean, they're built to last, aren't they? I mean, you talk about things now and they fall to pieces after a little while, but the craftsmanship I mean, I'm the same, we love our antiques and working on that sort of basis. But the antique stuff doesn't just stop with there. I mean, you've got a fantastic story throughout history. I mean, 1966, you were at Trinity College studying history together with English and French. And it wasn't maybe one of your first encounters with Robin Hood. Tell me about your role as the minstrel.
Well, actually, I think we can fast forward from that to my role as the minstrel was obviously spotted at the time because I did a bit of acting in Players Theatre. I've threatened my band when we go on tour later this year, and next year they're going to have to wear tights, and they're a bit nervous about this. And I said, so you guys can wear big cod pieces if you want, and alarm the ladies. But years later, I was caught up in this rather unfortunate thing called the Royal Knockout Tournament.
Oh, I remember that with Edward and that sort of, I remember that.
All of them, they were all involved, all the youngsters. And on one occasion, obviously because of my minstrel background, I was asked to save Jane Seymour from the Wicked Baron, which meant I had to climb. There was a big pond, and she was up on a balcony, I think, going, "Oh, help me, save me!" And I think I had to climb across this greasy pole and fall in and climb out of the water. What I didn't realize is, of course, my tights absolutely filled up with gallons of water, and as I came out, I mean, they're down to about there, and I was wretchedly pulling up my tights and then having to climb up and save the lady in distress. Oh, it was very funny. But the minstrel. Oh, yeah.
They had the glorious title, the brilliant stuff, the glorious title, "We've All Made Marian."
Yeah. That was the a play that my friends put together, and the call went out, "Who's made Marian?" All these guys shouting, "We've all made Marian." I'm not sure what my part in that play particularly was.
I think we would lose that in history somewhere. It's always a joy. But after Trinity, you obviously decided that you wanted to pursue a career either as a banker or one of those sort of things, but as a musician. And you started playing famously in Captain America's hamburger joint, £2 a night, and as much red wine, cheap red wine, as you could drink. Is that right?
Yep, that was it. A friend of mine called Mark Kavanagh said, after I left university, listen, if you're looking for something to do, I'm opening up the first hamburger joint in Ireland, actually, at the top of Grafton Street in Dublin. And if you go there now, there's a plaque outside saying this is where I started my career, which is kind of untrue because I started in BURGH Castle, but there I was. And there was one small microphone about this size and speakers about this size on the wall. So I was kind of hunched over this thing singing. And it's a pretty tough job singing in a restaurant because people are not there to listen to the singer. So you're kind of ignored most of the time. The only song that ever got a response was American Pie, you know. Bye, bye, Miss American Pie. Drove the Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. Then good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye, singing, "This will be the day that I die," and so on. So that, I thought, wow, they're all clapping along. And then I thought, right, I've got them now. I'm going to play one of my songs. And of course, they went straight back to the hamburgers. But again, you know, it's the hard road that teaches the humiliation and what you're good at, and you learn. I mean, I give you another example. The first time I went on tour, a major tour, was with Supertramp, who had their big album Crime of the Century, Gallagher and Lyle, lovely men, and me. And you could see all of us for £1 because we were the same label, A&M Records. And I was the guy that started the show for, 20 minutes or so. And it was tough, you know, people didn't want to see that. They wanted to see the main act. So we finally go across the Atlantic to Montreal because there was a radio station there, which is still there, wonderful, called CHOM, CHOM, who had this habit of playing entire albums. It was that kind of station. It wasn't like an AM station, FM. And the album had become very big there. And I was there with my first album, basically. So I walk out on the stage in McGill University to an expectant crowd of French Canadians, about 4,000. And they see this little guy coming with a guitar and they go, whistle, whistle, boo, va te faire foutre, everything you can imagine. So I thought to myself, I've come a long way to speak and sing to you bastards. So I sang away. And then as a final kind of riposte, I went out and took an encore. And the boos then. But here's the funny thing. A year later, my album Spanish Train and Other Stories came out. Sean picked it up. And a year after that, I was playing the Forum, 15,000 people. And it was just massive. And to this very day, Andrew, the love affair between the French Canadians in the province of Quebec, and particularly in Montreal, is astonishing. If I walk on the stage now in the Place des Arts or Théâtre Saint-Denis, et je parle français, so it helps a little bit, but the love, and it's just like 3 or 4 minutes of applause and standing ovations. Thank you. And it's subsequently I became very successful right across Canada with multiple platinum albums and stuff. And I love it. I've been going from Newfoundland. Next year I'll be going from Newfoundland right across St. John's, Newfoundland, right across to Vancouver again, which I've done about 20 times.
You've often said, Chris, that your objective is to light up the world. So every country that you visited will have a little shining light. How much of the world have you covered so far? How many more spots of light are needed?
Well, I'm actually looking at a map over there behind my setup, which I'll actually let's just show you. If I'm talking
yeah, let's have a look.
Hang about, mate. Let's go. So you're actually joining me in my studio.
We're going to guided tour of the. But I could sell it. I could be on the usual commission if this is the one for sale. Here we go.
Okay, this is just some guitars. Over here is said map, like that. I've done actually pretty good. In Russia, I do extremely well up in Russia. I've been there many times. Scandinavia, you know, I've got invitations. Africa, I've had invitations. Been to South Africa a lot. South America has been a bit of a difficult place. It's a hard place to get to, and to actually tour there is tricky. But in America, I've done lots of tours. Lots in Canada. In America, for example, "Lady in Red" is a huge song. Nobody has a clue who I am, but it's just on everything. It's the kind of go-to love song. Here is my kind of thinking room. There's plenty of thinking in here.
I like the ship. How old's the ship?
Where's the ship? Oh, that is actually handmade in Mauritius.
Oh, fantastic.
It's called Saint-Jean, and it's a place my family went to about 26 occasions for Christmas and New Year's, longing to go back. And it's a hotel called the Saint-Jean. Wonderful place. And now we come.
The Grand Dame of Mauritius, they call it, don't they?
That's it. And here is what I call my memorabilia room. So, see the slot here.
Now, if you've got a few discs on the wall there, Chris.
A lot. About 100, I think. Let's just around here. So,
which is the disc you're most proud of?
It's a difficult one. I suppose. I hope the signal is going to retain. This is pretty good. celebration of 45 million sales. That one up there.
You have to change that now. You're 50 million, aren't you now?
We've gone on. And this was an early show I did with a fairly unknown band at the time opening up.
Glorious.
And this is another poster I rather like. Wait a second, let's see if we can get you this one here. We were multiple headline acts.
It's absolutely. You were talking about earlier about when you sort of first started and the antics that some of the bands used to play. Supertramp. I remember there's one occasion when you were put into a flight case. Tell me about that.
Yeah, see, I was probably fairly objectionable. Probably I still am back in the day. But if you have a single guy with a guitar opening your show and you're a big organization, and like, why do we have to have opening up? Because same management, same record company. So just one time, I think I went out on the stage and I was bundled into a flight case and removed off the stage at the end of one of my little shows. I think my manager got very angry about that, actually. And I thought, what the hell? But subsequently, I kind of got my own back by years later. I offered Supertramp a chance to open up for me. A few of the songs, a few of the shows. But there was another occasion in somewhere like Plymouth or Portsmouth where I usually managed to get somebody to introduce me, because going out cold is very tough. Lights go down, guy walks out and starts singing single guitar on a stool. So usually, well, quite often somebody like a promoter would say, ladies and gentlemen, blah, blah. On this one night, there was nobody. So I thought, well, sod this for a lark. So I walked out on stage and said, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present to you one of the most exciting new talents to emerge in recent years with this new album, Far Beyond This Castle Walls. Would you please put your hands together for the extraordinary BURGH? I walked off the stage, picked up my guitar and walked out again. And of course, the audience went, ha ha, great, that's funny. They liked the nerve of it.
And I think it's that sort of quirkiness, isn't it? Because I think people like to have a laugh. So many people in this profession take themselves too seriously, don't they?
Yeah, I don't particularly want to talk about anyone act particularly, but yes, there are people, who insist on absolute silence when they sing, and shh, I want to sing a very important song here. No, it's not entertainment. And I don't know about you, Andrew, but I come from a generation of entertainers. I like this word because that's what people pay us for. And people, to make people happy, like I was telling you about these little videos I'm doing for people, weddings and funerals and all that stuff. It makes people happy, so why not? And that's what we do. But a lot of more recent songwriters seem to be lost. Maybe it's going back to the blues again. Woke up this morning, I felt nearly half dead, blah blah. But they sing about their marital breaks up. My boyfriend just left me, and I want to jump in the river. And okay, it's all mental problems, and I'm not diminishing them, but this is not entertainment. Why are these miserable songs?
Well, I think it's what we touched on earlier, isn't it? It's a combination of all that. If you can cover the whole spectrum of human emotion, which is what you do, and rather than just being a personal experience, what you do is talk about everybody's life, and that's why people can relate to the songs that you sing.
Well, yesterday, because I've got these upcoming concerts in July and August, I haven't decided not to make the same mistakes so many of my colleagues do, which is they don't sing for a year and then they think they can do it on tour. This is a muscle like the other one. You've got to build it up. So I find the easiest way to either play my guitar or play the piano or sing along with one of my own records, because at least I know the words and the chords, hopefully. But I was listening to an album called The Road to Freedom. And the first song, the title song, is about, in my imagination, about a farmer in late 1700s, perhaps. And his son is his only help on the land. And I'm thinking like the west of Ireland, west of Scotland, west of Wales. And the son is off to fight for freedom because that's what he wanted to do. And the farmer says, well, will your freedom send rain for the crops? Who's going to help me on the land? He's not interested. You take your road to freedom, but I'll be here. And it's a bit like the story behind Danny Boy, which is just a gorgeous melody. The father saying goodbye to his son. So that was the first one. And the second one is called Snow is Falling. And again, I have no idea where this came from, except the music that I remember. I was in a hotel in, where the hell was it? Near Salisbury, waiting for Chris Porter to pick me up to go to his studio nearby. And it was a sunny day, and I was in the living room. Sun was coming in. There was a piano, and there was a guy reading the Daily Telegraph to my right. And I said, "Do you mind if I just?" "No, go ahead." So I was kind of tootling away, and I went da, 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 on the piano, and the melody. I don't know what it does to you, but suddenly it took me to somewhere like Russia or Eastern Europe. And then this film began in my mind. And if you come with me with a camera, the camera moves in. It's Dr. Zhivago's Snowscape. And then we do a right. And the trees are so heavy with with snow, and occasionally some drops down, and it's utterly silent. And we go through the forest with the camera, all in one shot. And then we come to a clearing, and then this broken ground, also covered with snow. And we go to the broken ground, and in fact, it's the grave of about 300 or 400 young men who've been murdered. And it's their souls calling to be found. Now, I only came to that point, not because I was thinking about it, but the music told me that this is what it is. And then we go to autumn, the leaves are falling, and then to the families who got, I can see it so clearly in my mind in the film, I'm sure we've seen similar, where there's a mantelpiece with the pictures of the missing young man or the son or whoever, and the elderly people there rocking in their chairs and just dreaming about, where is he? What happened 3 years ago? And they've all been taken away to be murdered. And this did happen. I mean, not just in Russia, but also in Eastern Europe. So the idea came from nowhere.
And it is interesting, that whole sort of writing process, isn't it? I mean, and you lived with a writer when we first came to London in 1972 with Richard Fagan. Did you bounce off each other very well?
Yeah, there was three of us. There was James Morris.
Yeah.
And Richard Fagan, who subsequently wrote lots of stuff. You could probably remember.
British Empire, and he did something with Simon Callow, didn't he? He did A Chance in a Million, I think it was.
Yes,
all that sort of stuff. Great writer.
Very talented. I hardly see much of him, but ironically, James is 2 fields away. I hardly ever see him because of damn COVID.
Oh, right.
But he's up there. He started Windmill Lane Pictures and Windmill Lane Recording Studios. So he did very well. But the three of us were there all determined to make something of our lives. And I just wanted to try and get into the music industry. I mean, those days full of hope.
No, but I think it's when you bounce, and sometimes you need adversity in your life. I mean, as you say, you actually had quite humble beginnings at some stage. When you first went to the 12th century castle, there was no hot water, was there? I mean, I think you still have a cold shower every day just to get you going.
This morning, absolutely.
You thought, I'm going to stick to that Andrew Eborn today. I'll have my cold shower. Absolutely, I need a cold shower.
Well, I knew I was going to be on the Andrew Eborn show, so I'd have to have a cold shower just to perk up.
Absolutely, all got to be good. And you did all sorts of things. You were a quiche delivery person, weren't you, at one stage when you were making ends meet? It started with a quiche. I think there's a song there somewhere.
I don't think I'll write that one. It started with a quiche. Actually, it was mainly croissants. And there was this company called Justin de Blanc in Knightsbridge. And I used to have to go with another driver in a truck to Smithfield Market very early in the morning and collect great lumps of meat and turkeys, and it was a delicatessen sort of place, but it was and then going to the floral market as well. That was absolutely beautiful. Imagine a huge barn, just area full of beautiful flowers, and then go back and give the stuff to it was, I had to do everything. You had to keep body and soul together. I did lots and lots of jobs like that. I worked in a record store on Goldhawk Road, selling. Actually, it was interesting because what we were doing, it was a secondhand record store. So somebody would come in with a record and you'd have to assess it immediately. Ah, yes, this guy you've never heard of. I'll give you, you can either have a credit for that or I'll give you £2, whatever. But the number of DJs were coming in from BBC, it said, for promotion only, stickers on them, and then saying, yeah, what are you giving me for this?
Oh, you should name names, or maybe not. But we have lots of regular Radio 1 DJs on this show, which is always a thrill. But actually in 1974, after being a quiche deliverer and various other things, you eventually got signed by A&M Records. What I loved is your audition piece. You talked about Hot Barreled Hannah beforehand. Tell me about the audition that you did.
Well, that was with what happened was, it was the days when I got a publishing deal because a friend of a friend came to dinner and I played some songs and he said, "Oh, I'll give you a publishing." I thought, right, this is the first big step. And the next day he said, "Well, we'll organize publishing deals, no big deal unless you do an advance," which there wasn't in this case. And it was a very onerous deal as it was. So I won't go over that. But they finally discovered this guy called Dave Matjerison, who was with A&M Records. And he came to their office, quite a small office. And I said, "Well, actually, for this next song, I need to come out from the cupboard." So I went into the cupboard and I went, "Woo, woo," and then, "There's a girl on the plane, and Hannah is her name."
So it's always fascinating, isn't it, how people start? And it's greatly inspirational, Chris. I mean, talking to various musicians, say you do have to do all of it. It's the good and the bad, and it's not, there's no such thing as an overnight success. You have to work at it. All the experience that you had working in your parents' hotel, in that glorious castle, all the things with Captain America, all of that eventually pays off, doesn't it?
Yes, it gives you the background and backbone. You have to know what failure feels like. There is a much more instant route to success these days with the internet, but that, it's a bit like being taken in a helicopter to the top of Mount Everest and then told, "Now you learn how to climb." You just can't do that. It's much, much better and more enduring. As you see, I mean, I've been in this business 45 years now, and mainly because, I'm healthy, I love what I do, and people still all over the world love what I do. So, without that, I would probably stay at home a bit more often. But the thing is, it gives you the strength to get through the rough times, and there will be rough times in everybody's life, whatever the job position is. You're full of excitement about a new job, and your boss is a complete bastard to you, and this is very difficult. What do? Do you circumvent the boss and go to the boss's boss, or do you say, "I'll take it, I'll learn from it"? It's difficult. So these things happen in life. But certainly in my business, I think it's been described as one of the toughest there is. And there are not very many people around like me who are never been in a band, like a band member sort of thing.
Yeah.
A solo performer who does all the words and all the music. There's not a lot who have survived as long as I have. And it does require a certain inner punch and strength to be able to, to survive.
And you're right. I mean, it is that sort of definition of success, isn't it? You have to have resilience and also embrace failure. I always say that if necessity is the mother of invention, then failure is the father of success.
How beautifully put.
Oh, thank you. I've got a book. I'll send it to you together with your new album, the Andrew Eborn Book of Failure. It's all there. But you're right. Oh, yeah, it's in the post, or it's a rare unsigned copy. You can have that one.
Very much.
But what's great, Chris, is you do need to embrace those failures, don't you? And I think a lot of people, it's a tough business. A lot of people get rejected all of the time, don't they? And if you don't have that thick skin and don't keep going and so on and so forth, it's tough.
Well, I've always said it's built on disappointment, because you always believe this next album is going to be the big one, and that this next song is going to get on the BBC Radio 2 playlist. And you just get so used to it not happening for you. So, I mean, it doesn't sound like it makes you into a miserable person. On the contrary, it makes you into tough and resilient. In the early days, the casual insult of a critic was very, very hurtful, because you were trying to get up the ladder. Now it's utterly irrelevant. Critics are irrelevant when you get to a certain point, because now we can also listen to the fans on Facebook and all the other social media who tell you exactly what they feel. Directly. You don't have to have somebody who gets a free ticket to go to a concert to give his opinion.
But what I love, Chris, you handle the critics so beautifully, and it's a bad critic. What was it, Creepy Crawley, I think, and those sort of things. Famously done. But you give them what they. I mean, it's good that you answer back, isn't it?
Well, sometimes you have to, you know. On this guy, I did a show, one of three, I think, in the Olympic Theatre in Dublin a few years back. They were all sold out, and you know, tickets were at a premium. And this guy was the theatre critic. And if you're watching, Peter, you shouldn't have written what you wrote, mate, because he just thought he'd give his pals a laugh and criticise, I think, my trousers and the way I waved my hand when I walked on, and it was pitiful. And it was so clearly a set-up job. So I responded, I think, to the editor of the Irish Times, saying I nearly choked on my cornflakes this morning to even get a review in the Irish Times. But to their credit, they published his original comment, his review, and then my response. I don't do that very often. I don't want to give these people the credit that. I mean, I know I love football, for example, and I remember speaking with Stephen Gerrard and reading his books. Lovely man, and had some fun times. But um, they pay attention, unfortunately, to what the media say about them. And I say, you are far, far better than a guy sitting in a chair wishing he was doing what you're doing and being a world-class footballer. Pay no attention. It's hard to do that when people ring you up. Have you read what they said about you in the Sun or something? But nevertheless, once you get to a certain point, you have that inner strength to say, I will deflect all that stuff. It means nothing to me.
And you have, I mean, it's going back to resilience as well, but it's human nature. And it's the same with lots of people in the profession. You might have 99 brilliant reviews, but it's that one reviewer who's trying to score little points to get the sound bites. That's the one you sort of focus on.
That is human nature, isn't it bizarre? I came across this, not for me, but somebody else. I can't know. If I could remember, I'd tell you. Yeah, we always focus on the one critical thing. But you know, in all the years I've been touring, there have been. That was one time actually in Montreal, years and years ago. I did a show with Supertramp. Again, it was big show. I think it was an outdoor job, and there was two papers, which was one in French, one in English, and the one in English just said the opening act was terrible, and referred to them as Gallagher and Lyle and blah blah blah. Gallagher and Lyle were across the other side of the Atlantic, and the guy never went to the show. He just wrote the review, and the French one was great. So you get two completely different points of view. So after that, you kind of ignore them. But yeah, lots of funny things. Actually, I made a note, a couple of funny things that happened to me, if I may take you a moment. That was the time I went to Moscow to do a show in Lubyanka Square, which is where the notorious Lubyanka was. And there were to be, it's a free concert. They expected 50,000 people, which there were, possibly more. And on arrival, or pre-arrival, departing London, I was asked, is it okay if you do an interview at the airport in the VIP suite? It's no problem. Get there, go to the VIP suite, and there's a kind of team of people. Chris Burgh, we're having a little problem. Chris Burgh, please, we can't do it here. We go to a hotel. Okay, is that okay? We go to a hotel. Oh, okay. So I was all primed up to get to the hotel, and it's the same thing. Chris Burgh, it's not so good here. We go across. Look, we go across the square here. So we walked across the square, and it was like a setup that you get for a Christmas market, little stalls selling stuff. And so the camera comes on me, and there was this woman, and apparently this is going live all over Russia. And she says, Chris Burgh, what is your favorite jam? I said, what? What is your favorite jam? Do you like strawberry jam? You like apple jam? And she was getting spoonfuls out to put in my mouth. I said, oh, I quite like cherry jam. It's strong. And I was saying, what is this? There was the F word in my head, I can tell you.
Yeah.
What is going on here? And then a little later, sometime later, it was revealed that what had happened was the Economic Union had banned certain agricultural products to go to Russia. And so they, in the supreme man downwards, decided to show the world what Russian farmers can provide. So they got all of them to bring all this stuff into the center of Moscow, and there they were selling all this wonderful product. And I was completely taken, I was a patsy, I was just there to taste the jam.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? And so often that's why people start fights and things like that. It was P.T. Barnum who said, if you want to draw a crowd, start a fight. And I do think people in the media, that's what we do now. It's all about extremes.
Yes, I think you know, a lot of people trying to start up these days are told in this business, get a good lawyer, number one, and think of a really good story that gets your headline. And you can see it happening. I mean, I can't think of, I don't read the rags that often, but there are stories in there that you can quite clearly see this is the setup.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you're the same with your children and grandchildren now as they're going to get older. We advise them to take their news from different sources. I mean, they always say if you don't read the newspaper, you're ill-informed, and if you read it, you're misinformed. So what we do is we tell them you must look at the different stations, and it'd be the same story, but it's somebody else's take on it. And just as a historian, I mean, we had Charles Spencer on talking about his glorious, great history writer. And I know you've got a rich history with Charles and Diana. We'll come on to as well in a bit. But what he would do, he would look at the different eras and why are people writing in a particular way? Because so often they write backwards from the story they want it to be, rather than actually what it was.
Yeah, it depends on whose history you're reading.
Right.
Like as you know, I went to primary school in Ireland. So the history I was reading about the Irish, you know, the rebellions and so on, was very very anti-British, and very pro, you know, the rebels and stuff. Then in the UK, you get a completely different slant. So you can't even trust historians to do it correctly. They will write what they want, how they want history to be presented in their eyes. To get a completely informed historical view, I have to say I do listen to the BBC, and I got very friendly with John Simpson, who works as the chief correspondent. And when he tells something, I listen because it's correct, it's true. But as we've learned also from the man that I referred to possibly earlier as being chucked out of heaven and is there rotting in hell and wanting to get back up again, truth means nothing these days. People will believe what they want to believe, and isn't that the saddest of all?
It's rather like a choice, isn't it, Chris? And my background as a lawyer, as you probably know, and it always used to be, I promise to say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Sounds like multiple choice nowadays, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Which one would you go for?
Absolutely. I don't know. Which version of the truth do you want? And I think that's the problem, isn't it? Because we lose out on that sort of credibility. And people like to do a flashback. It's rather like you mentioned Chris de Burgh to anybody. Oh, I love the way you do your Russian accent, by the way. Give that again. How do they pronounce your name?
Kurisburg.
Kurisburg.
Yes, you talk. Wait, Andrew. Wait. I arrived in Moscow this time.
No, but you're a brilliant mimic. I love it. It's good. But you talk about Chris Lowe, and they forget that you've had decades upon decades of hits. As you say, 300 songs, a phenomenal artist around the world, 50 million plus. We saw all the gold discs. But people inevitably will always focus on 35 years ago, Lady in Red, and that iconic album. Now, talk to me about how that came about.
Well, let me think. Into the Light was coming out in 1986, and I was writing that stuff in 85. I had a Canadian band who had been with me many years, like from the beginning upwards. After I'd stopped doing the solo stuff, I had to put a small band together. And we were playing big venues, the stage. I'd had a major hit with Don't Pay the Ferryman, and another major hit with High on Emotion. These are big rock songs. People forget that. Oh, Lady in Red, I can't stand that song. Oh God, this ballad. Ugh. But have a look back. This guy can rock. And so you can. So funny at some of these shows I do. I see that the reluctant husband or boyfriend going, oh God, and the wife or the girlfriend jumping up and then by the end of it, these guys are going crazy, going, I didn't know he could do that stuff. Yes, I can. So during the making, the writing for that album, I noticed that I really only had one ballad on it, which was the one I wrote for my daughter who had just been born, for Rosanna. And I thought, well, one day I thought, well, I've got to give a bit of balance here. So I started tootling on my piano. Maybe I should go and tootle on my piano.
Oh, yes, I love the immediacy of all of this. Are we going to be sport with? But if Lady in Red, oh, come on. Oh, I'm going to do this every day, Chris. Just book me in to cancel whatever you were going to go and do previously. This is superb.
Here we go.
There we go, we're at the piano.
On a second, yeah. So I'm playing the piano, and this line came up from nowhere. I've never seen you looking so lovely as you did tonight. And then I thought, never. Wait a second. This is very curious. If that arrives in a song, the word never, why? So clearly this is people who've been together for a while, husband and wife perhaps. And then shortly afterwards, once I got the song working, but the first part, I had been at an awards show in Dublin. We were in a disco, and I looked over the room and I saw my wife being surrounded by admirers, beautiful woman. And I thought, right, that's the idea for the second part. I've never seen you looking so gorgeous as you did tonight. But then I worked on the song, and people say, how long did it take to write? And I said, well, probably about 15 minutes and 6 months, because that becomes the furniture that I talked about, to make sure that it absolutely works correctly. And I got this idea in my head of a couple going out for the evening. Is that too loud? And he's downstairs, he's ready to go, rattling the car keys. And she's upstairs doing the makeup, and he's shouting, come on, we're going to be late for the party. And she will have to do the makeup. And anyway, they go to the party in a frosty silence. He goes across the room to one side, maybe another room, has a few beers with his pals. And then later on, he goes to the first room and looks across the room, and there's this woman wearing a red dress, looking absolutely stunning, surrounded by admirers. And it takes him that kind of second. That's my wife. What are these guys doing? Get away. And it's the old thing about how many men can remember what their wife or their girlfriend or whatever was wearing the last time they went out. We're hopeless at that kind of stuff. So then the evening fades to an ending, but the last couple are on the dance floor. And he's basically said to her, I've been working too hard, I've been ignoring her, I'm really sorry. And he says, I've never seen you looking so lovely as you did tonight. I've never seen you shine so bright. I've never seen so many men ask you if you wanted to dance. They're looking for a little romance, given half a chance. I have never seen that dress you're wearing, or the highlights in your hair that catch your eyes. I have been blind, the lady in red is dancing with me, cheek to cheek. There's nobody here, it's just you and me. It's where I want to be, but I hardly know this beauty by my side. Yes, I'll never forget the way you look tonight. The lady in red, my lady in red.
And I'll tell you what, it's a song that gets you every time, isn't it? I mean, I remember seeing Mel and Pam, Mel Smith, a fantastic comedian.
Yeah.
And I think there was one occasion when you forced him to dance in Barbados, wasn't there, to that song?
I don't think I forced them. I think they probably leapt up and started doing it. Yeah, Mel Smith, what a man.
It was a great man. How did your friendship with him come about?
Oh, it was through mutual friends who had a place in Barbados called the Sangsters, Robert Sangster, the racing magnate, who's also not with us anymore, and his wife Susan. And we just had all sorts of fun people who were either staying there or came to the house or had dinners and so on. Yeah, great fun.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely. Well, I think it was Mel was recounting that story on your This Is Your Life, and he was the one who said you forced him up there, and it almost ended in divorce for him and his wife. But they did it in front of a cheering crowd, which I thought was wonderful. Very good. But you must go to lots of functions. I mean, there are a lot when you have such an iconic song, and it is. I mean, it's the pension. What is it? #1 in almost 50 countries, wasn't it? It was tremendous, zillions upon zillions of sales around the world. How do you feel when you hear other people sing it?
I've heard a variety of them. Um, I think it's a compliment. I mean, again, going back to Barbados, I was having a late breakfast once, and I heard this steel band on the beach playing it. So I had to. This is a moment. Come on! And I went over and I filmed them and I waved at them and they, hey man, and I said, well, actually, I wrote that song. No. So it's photographs and stuff. And then the same thing happened in Cape Town. There was another steel band there, and I don't know. It's a huge compliment, to be honest. And I suppose the downside is that some people who think that's the only song I ever wrote, and I've been making a living out of it ever since. Again, as I said earlier, if you don't like it, you don't like anything that artist does. So that's that. Write him off. That's fair enough. You don't have to like everything. It's like cheese. Nobody likes the same cheese all the time. But with that song, yeah, and people, a friend of mine, a wonderful friend called Paul Howard, who's a great writer here, we did a Zoom call for the Irish Times last week, and he was telling me that he was in San Francisco and it came on the radio, and he had to send me a text, it's on the radio, and then somebody in New Zealand just said, oh, I just heard on. I mean, it's, and America, as I spoke of, it's been on all the major TV shows. It's like the go-to love song, and it's, it certainly will outlive me, that's for sure.
And what's incredible, I mean, and it's a beautiful legacy. I mean, your whole work, you say over 300 songs, people forget that, and they should explore, because there is something for everybody, even if, as you say, some people try to take the mickey out of Lady in Red. It is a sensational song. It reduces people to tears. They will remember iconic moments in their life when that song was playing. And I think that's what you do so well, is a simple story of a man neglecting a woman, and you're taking them for granted at one stage, and that could affect people for all sorts of occasions, couldn't it?
It does, yeah, and it means that it allows people to put their own spin on it. I've never said, being didactic about it, this is what you have to see.
Yeah.
It's just they listen to it, and then they remember moments in their life when it helped them through a crisis, or they fell in love. I remember I was getting what's called an ASCAP award, the Association of...
I know ASCAP and BMI are also available, as they say, absolutely. Yes.
And I went up to get an award for that song, and I said, 3 minutes of pure joy, and I believe a lot of 3.5 minutes of a lot of babies have been conceived to this song, and blah, blah, blah. The next guy up was Phil Collins, who was getting the award. He says, I just heard what he said. I wonder what Chris de Burgh does with the other 3 minutes. Made me laugh a lot.
Brilliant. I love it. No, it is glorious. But talking about the writing process, I mean, you within your writing, you talk effectively about the human condition. And there are certain themes that do come up. I mean, as a historian, obviously, there's a lot about war and so on and so forth, World War I and World War II. There's a real fascination about that sort of side. And if you like, this sort of stupidity of war is a common theme as well, isn't it?
Well, when my daughter got married 6 years ago, which makes it 2014. No, it was actually 2014. Yeah, that's 6 years. What am I? And a bit. Anyway.
Yeah, anyway.
7 years. There was just a small group of people at this humanist wedding, which was delightful. And at the lunch, 27 people. I just stood up to make the speech. And I said, if this was occurring 100 years ago, all the young men sitting around this table would probably have joined up or about to join up, and most of them would not have survived. And I became fascinated by the First World War, particularly the Great War, probably because of my grandfather's involvement, General de Burgh, plus the fact that they were all living in a town called Naas, which is outside of Dublin, in an estate, and they were landed family, and as I say, with a Norman background. But all the boys volunteered, and Tommy de Burgh was the first Allied officer to be killed in the Great War, and they never found his body. And subsequently, my grandfather and his father went there to see what they could find out, and never found out what happened. Those kind of sad stories. There are multiple stories like that. And there was a wonderful one because my grandfather spent 4 years in the trenches, which must have been just horrific. And those soldiers never talked about it, and as they did the Second World War, because they all felt, well, they went through it, and how can you describe a rat eating the eye of your closest friend? The horrors of beyond horrors. But he told this story about his father, who wanted to enlist, but was told he's too old to enlist. So the father, um, he bought a large sort of van and made it into an ambulance and drove across the ferry and then across to the front in Flanders. And one day, my grandfather was slogging up, probably trench foot and everything, that all the horrors of the trench warfare. And he saw at the top of a hill a van with a big red cross on it. And he stopped and looked at it, and his father stepped out. And his father said to him, "My God, Eric, you look terrible. Here." And he reached into the van and took out a bottle of brandy, and he said, "There you go. I'll see you at the end of the war." And they did. I mean, these kind of things. But I often wonder, Andrew, whether a catastrophic occurrence like that winds up in the DNA of those people who survived, and do they pass it through the generations? Because a lot of stuff does get passed through generations through our DNA. And I've come across women as well as men for years who have this terrible melancholy, tristesse about being involved in the Great War. Somehow they can feel it, they can smell it, they were there. And it's the same with me. I feel as if I've seen lots of documentaries. I saw one the other night actually about the Great War, but it's just, and I think it was because the fact that those young men really, I wrote a song called Love of the Heart Divine about this guy. I'm going to, they grew up, this couple grew up in the same village in Cornwall or somewhere, and they get married, and then he joins up and all the other jolly boys, and the scene at the railway station where they're leaning out of those individual carriages, all they're waving their hats, and there's the brass band playing and all. We've all seen that kind of thing. And then the wife is standing there and she feels the baby for the first time kicking inside. And he goes off to the war, and we don't know what happens to him. And then I wrote subsequently a sequel. And he's then severely wounded after about 3 years, and he's lying in a shell hole. His lifeblood is pouring out of him, and he looks up to the sky. And at that very moment, a small boy with blonde hair leans over the trench and says, "Daddy, please don't die." And he crawls out, gets back to his lines, and then a few months later is sent back home. And I can see the scene like November. The train pulls into the platform. Only one person steps out. It's this man in a trench coat. He's got a duffel bag over his shoulder and a stick to support him. And the leaves are blowing down the platform. And in the distance, he sees a woman with a little boy. And the little boy runs up to him. I get very emotional talking about this because I can see the film. Little blonde-haired boy jumps into his daddy's arms and says, "My daddy has come home." And these things are so clear in my head as movies. And allied to the catastrophe of that war, where the innocence and the armor is involved, the weaponry, it's just men against boys. It was horrible.
I know it's awful. I mean, and your interest, and it's so right to shine a spotlight on it, because we're so used to doom and gloom and tragedy in the world that if it's just statistics, it depersonalizes it, doesn't it? And I think if you can shine a spotlight on individual cases. I mean, you in 2006, you bought a letter from a World War I soldier who was in the trenches. It was written on Christmas Day, on the day of the truce, 1914. Tell me about that letter.
Well, I saw this letter coming up for auction at Bonham's, and I thought I have to have this because that speaks of that extraordinary Christmas. And it's written on standard issue paper in pencil, obviously by an officer. it was by an officer, but we don't know who he was. He just signs his name, Boy. And it just describes what they were doing on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day 1914, when they all thought that the war would end by Christmas. And that's the irony, obviously it didn't. And he said, amongst other things, the Germans have stopped shooting at us and they're putting candles and flares all along the top of their trenches and they're singing songs, because the Tommies didn't realize that for German people and Austrian and Swiss, that Christmas Day their Christmas is the 24th and ours the 25th. So the extraordinary thing was, as they were singing Stille Nacht, on the Allied side, they were singing back Silent Night. So very, very cautiously, people got out of their trenches, both sides, and walked across no man's land and shook hands and gave each other cigarettes. A few of the Germans spoke good English, and little mementos. And then it describes how the following day what they had for breakfast in the Allied side, and then there was the game of football, and it just made me realize this is an individual talking about his individual experiences, and the date on it, December the 25th, 1914, is incredible. I take it out every Christmas Day, and either read it to myself or read it to my family. It's just to have a look at it, to remember one person's war. We don't know what happened. But that was the reality for so many young men.
And that is, I think it's so right, because people forget these moments in history, and if you don't shine a spotlight on the atrocities of war, as you say, the complete futility of fighting, we don't learn the lessons. But we still don't learn the lessons, do we? We don't learn the lessons of history, and that's why history keeps repeating itself.
Well, this extraordinary thing now of you can sit in Wisconsin in a bunker and kill one person across the other side of the world with a drone. Okay, that limits the amount of ground troops. But the other thing is, we've created enough weapons to destroy the planet multiple times. I mean, what are we? Who are we? You know, I wrote a song called The Hands of Man. These are the hands that build cathedrals. These are the hands that feed the world. These are the hands that kill the ones we heal. These are the hands of man. I mean, what are we? So for those people who think that I'm just up in the sky and being living in history, the spacemen coming, traveling, and Patricia the Stream, I do think about things and I try to bring them into my songs.
No, you're right. It's what we touched on earlier, Chris, is that you're absolute, the depth and breadth of what you do. Yes, there's some great upbeat songs, and there's also real tragedy in them. You talk about, and when you talk about the hands of man, and I think it's exactly where we're going with this. But the only ones with opposable thumbs, isn't it? Primates. And it's amazing when you think, when you're writing that song, you've spoken about this beforehand, what we can do great things with it. You can create the wonderful furniture we were talking about beforehand, but we can also build those cathedrals, but also kill the people we heal. Crazy. No, absolutely tragic, but it's right, I think, to look at that sort of side. But World War has also got some good things in it, because you had a fantastic wine collection which you sold. Tell me about your wine collection.
Well, I've been lucky enough to be able to afford reasonably good wines, great wines, in the last many years. But before that, it was, you know, the usual plonk, Blue Nun and stuff. There's nothing against Blue Nun, by the way. Well, there is.
There's the sponsorship deal done. That's the tour. The Blue Nun, we're going to go and do that. It's going to be good. We love it.
Damn. But it started actually again at the castle, because I was the wine waiter, apart from lots of other stuff. I didn't know much. I mean, the wines we served were adequate, Spanish or French or something. But this one guy called Joe McNerney, a lovely man who was in shipping in Liverpool, got very close to him and his family subsequently. He said to me, "Come on, lad." Oh, that's the wrong accent. I won't do Liverpool because I'll be killed next time I go there. But he said, "Do you have, I understand your father says you have Chateau de Cam. Do you know what it is?" I said, "No idea." So he said, "Bring it up from the cellar, chill it, and open it very carefully." Of course, Chateau de Cam is the greatest dessert wine in the world. It is absolutely astonishing. The grapes are it gets botrytis, which is this they call the noble rot. And then the grapes go to nothing and they become very intense and picked by hand. It is beyond belief. Anyway, there I am, 15 or 16. And Joe says to me, "Have you ever tried this stuff?" So I said, "Of course not. No, I haven't." So I tried it and I went, how could anything, a liquid, taste like that? It was beginning of a long love affair. And down the years, I've been all over the world several times, and I've been given wines and tasted wines. For example, I did a tour of South Africa, which has stunning wines, by the way, of a different bottle of white and red in my dressing room after the show every night. I learned a lot, and I remember doing big tours of Scandinavia. All I did was read this book about Bordeaux. Um, just learning, and trying and trying. And record companies were often very generous, and they said, "Look, we know that you have an interest. Here's the wine list you choose." So I chose good stuff. So I began to collect not just the top end wines like the Aubrions, Mouton Rothschild, and Lafite and stuff, but also lesser wines, because that's where you find the really good stuff, and the bargains. Italian wines, amazing. German wines, amazing. But I saw one day a collection of Chateau Mouton Rothschild in Magnum,
Right.
from 1945 to onwards. And you buy this wine not actually for the liquid, you buy it for the etiquette, the label. Each label was designed individually by wonderful, wonderful artists, Picasso, for example. And then John Huston, the director, who got a very good one, by the way, he got 1982. And I'm sure they don't pay them. I mean, they just give them lots of Mouton. So 1945 was the year of victory, which is remarkable because this wine from Bordeaux would have been made during the invasion of Normandy and Bordeaux. And they made, I mean, the stunning wines, as you, a man of distinction yourself, you probably 1945, 1982, 1961, 66, and onwards into the 2000. So I had this collection until about 2005. And for about 10 years, I got extra bottles so I could try the wines. At least I knew what they would tasted like. And occasionally I'd have the chance at somebody else's party in 1987. Latour, was Latour? Was it Mouton? I can't remember. But anyway, so and then I sold that collection because I'm not, I have it in wine fridges. Nobody's seeing it apart from me and a few friends. Give it to somebody who bought it, I think in a restaurant in China or somewhere. Also, I had Chateau Lafite. I sold through Christie's a lot of top end wines because I could not go into my cellar and say, oh, this evening I'll have a bottle of that. It's only worth £1,000, so I'll have, no, waste of time.
Well, it's worth more than £1,000. I think the top one's what, 12,650 quid from 1945. It came in a little straw bed and a box and everything. It was a world record, I think, in total, wasn't it?
Well, probably then, but these things are for collectors and collectors only. You'd be shocked if you actually took out one wine from the collection and tried it, because that destroys the whole point of it.
No, I understand. I'll come round. I don't mind being shot.
I still have some very nice wines, but now I'm kind of going into the like rosés this time of year. What else do I? Italian wines, right. Fantastic Italians, particularly from Tuscany area, from Sicily, Germany, particularly the southern part of Germany. Riesling and English wines too, they're pretty good.
Oh no, and lots around the world. I know I travel a lot as well, not nearly as extensively and not nearly as many concerts, and but fantastic stuff. But it was a record at the time. But they said it was like $500,000 it went for in the end. Is that right?
The collection, yeah, would have been about that. Yeah.
But fantastic. And what I love was I'm sure your sense of humour again as well, is that when talked about mainly sort of red wines from that sort of period, you said that your wife and daughter prefer white.
They do, actually. Yeah. They prefer white wine. And I've gone, I don't know about you, but and maybe some of your listeners and viewers would maybe agree with this. The older you get, the less, the older I get, the less red wine I can drink. And I'm not a regular, frequently every night of the week kind of job, but a good glass of red wine is all I can take. And that means a bottle of red wine can last me 4 days easily.
I'm with you. The better the bottle is, it's like brandy and whiskey and so on and so forth. You savor it, don't you? And you savor every mouthful, as you say, the creme and various other ones. You want to enjoy everything. It's not about quantity; it's about quality.
And unfortunately, a lot of the winemakers are making stonking wines now, like 14, 15.5 ABV alcohol by volume, 16. I mean, that'll knock you over. I mean, you're getting into the port area, which is around 18 or 20. But so I love a light white wine. I mean, if you want to send me a case, of course, like Chassagne Montrachet or
Yeah,
Pouligny
I think my birthday's first. I have to say. My birthday's first, Chris. I know yours is in October. Mine's in July. So here we are. I'll give you whatever you give me. Sounds good.
Okay. Treat yourself to a bottle from a white wine from Antinori in Tuscany called Cervaro, Cervaro. Just superb. And you know, when you're talking about the top end French Burgundies, although I love them, they are extremely expensive. So you can do way, way better by going down into different areas, and you're finding great quality elsewhere. That's what I find fascinating about wine.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful journey. Have you ever tried the Japanese sake as well, which we like? It's and they do it's a similar sort of thing. I sound as though I'm going to come on here with my Russian jams as well, but I'm not. So it's going to be interesting on that sort of basis. But
Sake, I think the thing not to do is order in a proper Japanese restaurant. Don't order it warm or hot.
oh, yeah.
Because they give you the cheap stuff. So I have tried, a number of different cold sakes. They're actually delicious, but I'm not much of a connoisseur of the sake. And the other wine that I've become very bored with is the grape is Sauvignon Blanc, because although a lot of people love it, I had a great deal of it, particularly Cloudy Bay and Kuma River from New Zealand, and it was just overkill. And that when you open up the bottle and put it in the glass, boom, all these multiples. And the first few times is nice, but so if you're going to send me something Chardonnay, actually, talking of which, a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't stand Chardonnay. I had enough Chardonnay." And you say, "Oh, well, do you like champagne?" I adore champagne.
There you go.
Same grape.
No, it's the same. I'm not a big fan of Sauvignon Blanc, mainly because my childhood, I didn't like gooseberries very much. And you're right, that big aroma, there's a lot of gooseberries, so maybe it's triggering the mind, but it still is a good base for various other things as well, which is extraordinary. Now, you've had a career which has got some tremendous iconic moments. Talk to me about some of those. I mean, you talk about Borderline. You were invited by the then Chancellor Cole. Talk to me about that moment, because this is where you're uniting East and West Germany. That must have felt rather special, didn't it?
Yeah, it was at the Brandenburg Gate at midnight, and it was shown on TV around the world. I sang that song Borderline at the request, as you say, of the Chancellor, and it was actually extraordinary, because that was the marriage of East and West. And as often happens in marriages, it wasn't the perfect marriage subsequently. But in the center of Berlin that night, there were 3 million people celebrating. And I've been going to Germany, and it is a country I absolutely love performing in. I've been the length and breadth of it. The people are wonderful. They're so loyal, supportive. It's a hell of a good place to be. Great food, great wines, lovely people. I took a group of friends actually and I had a big holiday, a big birthday 10 years ago. And we went, and I said, pack a passport, clothes for warm weather, and I'm not going to tell you where we're going. And we went to Germany, and they were knocked out. And the weather was stunning. The place was stunning. The history is stunning. So I love going there, as you can tell. But anyway, in the center of Berlin that night, 3 million people. And after the show, I was with my PA, and I got completely lost because, I'm kind of little. And I was supposed to go and have a celebration in the Bundestag. And people were saying, "Oh, where's Christopher? I don't know, where's this guy gone?" And I turned up about half an hour later and said, "I'm so sorry." I kept saying to people, "Where's the Bundestag?" That way. And of course, I couldn't see because of the sea of people. So, yeah, there's been, and then I would say the most memorable concert I ever did was in Ephesus in Turkey, where there's this arena, amphitheater, which was built 300 years before Christ, and where St. Paul would preach to the Ephesians about not worshipping the graven image of Diana. And very little has changed. I don't think you can do shows there anymore. But the backstage area was this little cells, I suppose, for the monks or whoever. And when things fell over, they were left. And there's the little village of Ephesus right beside. And standing there in front of 20,000 people looking up at the stars, knowing that the power could go at any minute because it had gone twice during the afternoon, and that I would have to perform acoustically. And it was spine chilling. The whole event was extraordinary to be in such a place of historical significance. And there we were singing, amazing.
And it is incredible. And you've also, I mean, you're incredibly generous with your time, raising money and awareness for all sorts of causes, including the Kurds. I mean, you got talk to me about how that came about. I think it was Jeffrey Archer, wasn't it, at that stage? And Sting and Paul Simon got involved. And what was it?
Yeah.
50 million people around the world watched that particular concert.
It was extraordinary because I knew Jeffrey, and I'd watched the films that the BBC did of the refugees, old people, children being pursued up the mountain by a vengeful Saddam Hussein. And it was so horrible to see. So night after night, you'd see these unfortunate people just because they were from a Kurdish. I mean, we could talk about the Jewish Holocaust and why them. I mean, I have friends who are Jewish, and I look at them, why would they have been singled out back then? The same thing with the Kurds. So Jeffrey actually called me and said, look, we're going to have to come up with a song. And I said, look, I've got one. It's called The Simple Truth. And he listened to it. He said, it's about, oh, hang on, this could be a moment. I'll just sing a little bit of it because it gives a flavor of what it was all about. And the whole thing became a concert for the Kurdish refugees, The Simple Truth thing. A child is born on a battlefield, a soldier boy falls to his knees, and a mother cries in joy and pain. When will I feed my boy again? A child is born to an ordinary home, east or west, it could be anyone. But we all want to know, will my child survive to see the day when we will live in peace again? When will we see the simple truth, the only thing that's worth a damn? The life of a child is more than a forest. The life of a child is more than a border. The life of a child is more than religion. The life of a child is only a heartbeat from eternity. We must believe, for the sake of humanity, we must believe.
Absolutely stunning. And 800 million people around the world watched that concert. It raised an amazing 57 million. It just shows the power of good, putting this in perspective and so on and so forth. And you also did, well, you were going to be the first person to perform in Tehran. Talk to me about Tehran.
Wow. Well, I remember I was doing a series of concerts in the UK with orchestra and choir in beautiful places like Blenheim Palace, Hampton Court Palace.
Oh, I was at Blenheim Palace yesterday. I love Blenheim Palace. It's gorgeous.
The place to do a show. And, you know, and then there was Castle Howard as well. And there was a bandell and orchestra and choir. And people would bring picnics. Wonderful. It's so English. It's wonderful. And sometimes people would get dressed up in tuxedos and bring the table and the chair and butler and a candelabra and the whole rigmarole. And one night I was on the stage and I suddenly saw this whoosh of flame coming from the audience. What the hell? So I was called over my peer. What the hell was that? He said, oh, that was the butler. He was flambeing the pancakes, the crepe Suzette. Oh, that's great. And then so I offered, then I got in some champagne. I said, anybody in a tuxedo, I'll give a bottle of champagne to. So that became a thing. Anyhow, after one of these shows, I met these two very charming young men, and they said to me, do you realize that you are the biggest artist in Iran? I said, I had no idea. They said, well, you are just enormously popular. We love your songs. We love the way you sing, the things you sing about. So that began a whole process of communicating with the people in Iran. And then I was the first artist to be given permission by the Islamic Council to actually perform there. So we went there, what, 4 or 5 of us, after a show I did in Istanbul, flew to Tehran, got picked up in the morning. And the first thing I noticed was the long queues to a petrol station. And then as we went past the enormous statue to who was one of the leaders, supreme leader, and I was hearing these muttered curses from the people who were driving me. They looked across it, and then it became quite clear that a swathe of young people who were not enchanted, and still the same thing. And I spent 3 or 4 days there, and I couldn't have been more charmed by the people. Going to a restaurant, just everybody would come over and want photographs and say thank you so much for coming. Anyway, in the event, having done a big press conference, which was attended by France Press and CBS News and all of ABC, BBC as well, we set a date, we set a series of concerts, and I said, I will not perform here if there's segregated audience. So it has to be men and women together, otherwise, it's going to be. And they all agreed to that. The Revolutionary Guard and were difficult to deal with, but anyway, we finally got the green light, and then. There was Ahmadinejad came in, and he wanted to, and then we had McCain, and who was the other presidential runner? One of them wanted to bomb the place, the other wanted to. I mean, it just became an absolute mess. It's now, unfortunately, a toxic place in terms of political reasons to go there. We've had the teacher there who's been held on a pretty strong pretext for a long time. But I would love to go. I know I still have a lot of fans there, and I get regular communications from the people. Who knows? I hope before I can stop singing, I will actually get.
We have, as I say, we have to keep lighting up those lights on that map for you to make that make sense. But you're also the first artist to play in the Lebanon after the Lebanese civil war. How did that come about?
Oh, that was because a friend of mine here in Ireland was the consul in Lebanon. His mother was Lebanese. His father married. He was I think an English army man. Anyway, she was an outstanding beauty at the time, and he's told me that when he is in Beirut during the civil war, people tended to go to the bunkers, and often the radio and people would play my kind of music. And he said, you should go there. They're going to really appreciate if you can go to Beirut. So it would have been about, you probably got the information there, 95. Arrived in Beirut with band, and it was astounding. It was a scene of chaos coming out with all these people around me trying to so we get into this motorcade with 2 open jeeps with people with guns, machine guns, everything mounted, and 2 behind, and sort of me in the middle. And it was a bit nerve-wracking. And they said, we are going to take you through the Hezbollah stronghold. They've allowed you free passage through this. I said, okay, thank you very much. Then we got onto the freeway. And if there was any kind of holdup on our side of the freeway, what they did was they crossed over to the incoming lane coming at you, and the guys waving their arms to get the van. And I was just closing my eyes. Oh, no. And then the actual concerts themselves were marvelous, although the amount of guns around was pretty scary. There was what we have, the UN peacekeepers. We had various different factions, all with an interest. And we did 2 shows in a car park up in the hills near the university. I think about 20,000 a night. And the people were so grateful, incredibly grateful for this. And it started a love affair between me and Lebanon and Beirut that's been going even to this day. Last year, I had 2 concerts planned to perform there. I had to cancel them, also in Dubai. And I performed in Beirut multiple times, and I absolutely love being there. Beirut used to be the Paris of the South. It is still a beautiful city. It obviously has its problems with, Syria and Iran close by, and Israel. But in Palestine, I should mention. But there was one show I did, a television show called, what's it called? Star Academy. And it was the first time that youngsters from all over the Arab world, men, girls, and boys, who had extreme talents, either musical or something else, dance, would actually live under the same roof. And every week, I think every Friday, they would perform something, either as a dance group or a musical. And I did that quite a few times. And each time that was watched, it was watched by about 120 million people all over the Arab world. And that is awesome stuff. And the last time I was there, I got an award, actually.
Here we go. Let's have a look at the award. Here we go. It's like one of those sort of goon sketches where you go away in the background and I can hear the little voice of Christa Bergh somewhere. Here we. Oh, look at that for an award. Oh, come on.
This is an award from the people of Lebanon, and it's awarded about every year to about 8 or 10 people who are from all walks of life. Politicians, journalists. It's got very little to do with music, but I think because of my belief in those people there and wanting to help, I got that award. And in fact, the moment that appalling bomb went off in the docks, I think about this time last year, wasn't it? August? July? I don't remember the date. But I immediately got in touch with our promoter and said, anything I can do. So I did a little Zoom call with one of the TV stations. But it's a place that I want to go back to. And
beautiful. I mean, stunning. Hold up that award again, because it's BIAF, isn't that what it says?
That's what it says.
Fantastic stuff. It's a proud moment, isn't it? I mean, and a lot of these things which are iconic in terms of that sort of stuff, the recognition and love for you around the world is tremendous. Some of your stuff has been lost in history as well. I mean, the universal fire. I understand a lot of your original masters and things like that got destroyed in that fire in 2008. Is that right?
In Los Angeles, yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of other people.
As well, I know that lots of artists' things were destroyed.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Fleetwood Mac were involved, Sting and the Police. It was our original tapes. And the appalling thing is that Universal did not reveal this fire and all the water damage for about a year afterwards.
Well, it's the New York Times, I think, that broke the story, wasn't it, for you?
Yeah, it was terrible. But, I guess it's history, so we have to move on. And
well, but it's good to. What was lost then? Did you know from your own point of view? Your own collection?
The original 2-inch tapes of all the albums prior to that. So if we wanted to get a backing track, for example, of original backing track of Lady in Red, doesn't exist. If we want to get a backing track for Say Goodbye to It All, or going back even further, gone. So it is really bad.
Really tragic. Now, apart from your massive fans from country point of view, you lots of royal fans as well, not least Princess Diana, who we mentioned earlier. She always cites you as one of her favorite, if not the favorite artist. And if Lady in Red was going to be played anywhere she was, she'd want to hear it 2 or 3 times. Talk to me about your relationship with Diana.
Well, that came about, I think, because of she came, if I am not incorrect, to the concert for the Kurdish refugees in Wembley. And I met her and her husband, Prince Charles, and great chats. And she was asking me about a song I wrote about the Bombardin and Skillen. And I talked to her about that. I think I sent her a copy of that because it was never recorded. I think I did a copy. And we just had a good rapport, kept in touch, and I sent her new albums. And then we met up on a number of occasions. And I remember there was one time she'd just come back from Argentina, and it was a very difficult tour for her because there was still tension. And I think the British government were not pleased about her going there. And being a woman that she was, she went into her correspondence almost immediately on return to Kensington Palace and wrote me a lovely letter. I'd sent her an album called Beautiful Dreams, and she wrote this letter saying, just back from Argentina overnight, I could do with a beautiful dream right now, and stuff like that. and a helicopter trip when Richard Branson renamed his fleet Lady in Red with a cocktail called Lady in Red, and I was hidden up by the nose of this 747, and to revealed, and she was there, and I sang Lady in Red, and then I had a helicopter that I was taking back to I can't remember where, Heathrow or somewhere, and she said, "Can I get a lift?" So we dropped her off at Kensington Palace. Little things like this, and yeah, what a tragedy! What an absolute tragedy! And I know that you're very close to Charles Spencer, and I know him fairly well. In fact, I was doing a radio show in Ireland last February and February for last year. And suddenly this guy comes on and he's talking. This Charles, what are you doing? He was talking on the radio show. Well, lovely to hear from you.
And you were in the Czech Republic when the terrible news broke that Diana had died on the 31st of August 1997. Tell me about that moment.
Well, the day before, I'd been invited over to Czech Republic to perform a concert because there'd been serious flooding, very bad flooding. And would I do a concert just to cheer the people up and raise some funds? So I get there with Peter Oxendale, my keyboard player, and it's in a football field stadium, but the rain is so heavy. Oh my God. They put me and him one side, and about, I don't know how big is a football, but 200 meters away, 200 yards away, is this audience, about 7,000 people, and just rain coming down. So that was that. And then we'd been invited to a man's house for dinner, and he was a philanthropist who had arranged his home into a kind of Disneyland for disabled children. It was beautiful. There was tigers and lions and all sorts of things and fun rides. And I remember we arrived with the driver well, three of us and the driver in a Mercedes, and he parked up, and we went in. We looked around, and then because it was Slivovich night, which is when they present this particularly potent or snap stuff, and it was an indoor-outdoor barbecue. The barbecue was there, and there was a kind of funnel and so on. And every so often, somebody would throw Slivovich into the fire, and there would be an explosion, boom. And I was sitting beside this lady, and she said, "Oh, Chris Borg, well, do you know what I do?" So I have no idea. And she said, "I'm the wrestling champion from Czech Republic." I went, "Oh, really good." Oh. So then, such a funny story. Then we decide to leave. So we get in the car, and the driver kind of reverses. The back right wheel goes over a cliff. It's a bit like at the end of the Italian Job, you know. And what? So we could feel the car beginning to slide. So we all jump out of the car, leave the driver, and we flagged down a guy I'd noticed there. He was with his girlfriend in a two-seater, and the three of us climbed into it. And I had the girlfriend on my lap, and there was the Jesus in the back. Including amongst us was a girl from the record label, English girl, whose name escapes me, but she became notorious, but I won't say what we called her. But anyhow, when we came out of this guy's premises, did a right up the hill, and the guy said, "Oh no, I've gone the wrong way." So he turns the car around, this tiny little MG, and the back wheels go over another cliff. So the girl, the English girl, climbs out and disappears. Where's she gone? And we hear this kind of moaning sound, and then she climbs up covered in brambles and stuff. She's slipped all the way down the ditch. So anyway, that's the funny side of the story. The next morning, I'm going down to the restaurant for some breakfast, and I see this lovely man called Bill, who was a private jet we'd come out on. And he's sitting there. And I said, "Bill, are you okay?" He said, "They've killed our princess." I said, "What do you mean?" "They should have looked after her. They've killed our princess." He was in tears, this lovely man. And yeah, and that's how I heard about it. I called home, and Diane said, "Well, we've heard that she's injured, but we don't know any more." And then that was it. And then we subsequently got the invitation to Westminster Abbey and to the funeral. And I never forget when Elton did his song. He was very close to me, and he looked pretty shook. But the doors of the abbey were open, and outside we'd been the night before, and it was like a scene from, it was just like the Holocaust or something horrible. No, that's not the right word. All these people in tents, very quiet, in tents, sleeping overnight, with candles and pictures of Diana, and it was like a scene from a movie. And the next morning was beautiful sunshine, and they had the doors open. And when Elton finished his song, you could hear the applause outside, but nothing happened inside the cathedral. Sorry, the abbey. And then Charles Spencer got up and he made his famous speech, and he very kindly gave me and a few other people a copy of that speech in bound. And I have a copy here somewhere. And at the end of his speech, people inside, we heard the applause outside, massive applause about the role of the media in her death, and how they had been held responsible in some way of making her the most pursued, the most hunted woman in history, which she was. And then suddenly the applause carried on down the abbey. Unbelievable. And the people standing up and almost punching the air, going, yes. It stopped at the next bit where the royals were. So that's it. But that was my memory of that day.
It was, and as you say, Diana means the goddess of hunting, and she was the most hunted woman. That's the point that Charles was making. And the Duchess of York, you gave some of the lines to her which inspired the song, and Sarah wrote those in the Book of Condolences. Tell me about that. You were shining like a million suns.
Yeah, I'd been in touch with Sarah before that. I mean, subsequent to the car crash. And I said, look, I've written a song. It just came out of nowhere. You're so loved by the Queen of Hearts. And you're shining like a million suns. And there's a new star up in heaven tonight. And as we say goodbye, I can hardly see for the tears in my eyes. And you are shining like a million stars. Suns, and there's a new star up in heaven tonight. That was the gist of it. And she said, oh, it's beautiful. And I made 100 copies then of that CD and gave it to the family. I still have a few left, actually. And made it, I never released as a single, but it then subsequently turned up on a later album. Yeah, tragic, even to this day. I mean, I saw that the statue being unveiled. In fact, my wife and I were invited to Kensington Palace 3 years ago to talk to about 30, 40 other people involved with the design of the statue, including the sculptor himself and Prince Harry and Prince William. Anyway, I think the public can judge what they think of it.
Yeah, I think that's right. But the other thing that happened on the 27th of June, I mean, in 1998, there was a concert which Lord Spencer obviously organised, and you performed at that concert, and you performed the song at that concert. What I particularly love, I know you can tell the story, it was quite a cloudy night, but you were singing that song, and then the clouds opened effectively, didn't they?
Sort of, yeah, that was my memory. It had been raining a lot, and we were staying in Althorp, whichever he wants to call it. And as people did in those smart houses, they left their Wellington boots at the door. Yes. Now, I had a pair of Wellington boots that I had been wearing, and when it came to me to go up, can you walk up to the stage now, please, Chris? So I thought, somebody's taken my Wellington boots. My God. So all that was left was a pair of children's boots, and they were agony, and I could barely walk. And I got about halfway up the hill, and somebody went by in a Range Rover, and I said, would you please give me a lift? I can't, my feet hurt. And I was carrying my shoes. So anyway, did the concert, and afterwards there was a big hoolie back in Althorp. And yeah, it was a memorable night.
And well, I think the thing about the clouds as well is that when you were looking up to the sky and you were singing this song, the clouds parted, and there was the brightest possible star shining down.
It sounded like a romantic moment, but it actually did happen. Yeah, extraordinary.
And I think you said to the people, did you spot that as well? And I think it's because spirituality plays a big part in your life, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, I'm not a fan of organized religion. In fact, I wrote a song called "The Mirror of the Soul" about a monastery in the 15th century or 16th century in France. It was in my imagination. It's my my strange imagination, where this extraordinary thing, this massive diamond, arrives out of the sky right in front of this sort of peasant farmer. And it's there, the dog sniffs at it, and he picks it up. And in the moment he picks it up, this light booms out of it, and he drops it in terror. So he decides to bring it to the monastery and the monks. So he brings it to them, and they look at it and they go, ah, we can make some money out of this. We can really, we'll sell eternal salvation, as many people as you want into heaven. Just keep on bringing the gold and the money and give you everything you want for the future life and so on. And all your sins will be eradicated for a bag of gold. And so the monks, but unfortunately for them, the light doesn't shine. So in my story film in my head, young boys have heard about it, and they go into the chapel where this thing is up on the altar. And the monks have used the sun to come down on a certain beam, and then it kind of beams out light, and everybody goes, ooh, ah. And this boy picks it up at night, and suddenly massive light, and everybody sees it from all they come rushing, and then they realize what the monks have been up to. And the point of it is only love can light the mirror of the soul. So people with love in their hearts. So spirituality for me is, I'm convinced there is something, a sixth dimension. There have been too many millions and millions of either emotions or feelings or people's responses to events that cannot be explained. And we'll find out, one of us, one day, soon of us.
I know, I think that's absolutely right. But the other thing that you talk about is the power of healing, and you yourself with the power of the heat that you can feel to relieve pain and so on and so forth. Talk to me briefly about that.
Well, I got very nervous about talking about this, but not nervous, but it's difficult to talk about because people think it's bogus. But there are a lot of people out there who do use their hands to heal. And normal medicine does not understand this because they've obviously gone through medical school, and they say, look, we can give you drugs and we can give you physiotherapy, but it is possible. I think possibly because I use my hands for making music, for guitar and piano, and I express myself with my hand. Maybe that's why. But there are genuine healers out there who can detect pain, and they can take away pain points. Obviously, you can't do much about a broken leg, but I think you can. I think the principle is quite interesting because, for example, if you were to hit your thumb with a hammer, two things happen. You go, ow, and I'm never going to do that again. So the pain radiates all the way up, all the way up your arm, all the way to your brain, ow, all the way back to your hand again. So that conduit becomes compromised, and there will be what's called referred pain as well, where the point of pain possibly there, but actually the place you can take it away could be somewhere completely different. So it's like if you could imagine a Canadian river with logs. What the human brain can do is, with their own self-healing abilities, remove those logs. So to allow the free passage of healing up and down from the brain to the point of pain and back up again. I mean, that's my own personal feeling about it.
No, but you're right. There are things to do with heat, and as you say, it's not mending broken bones and so on and so forth. That's where the controversy starts. But heat has a power, and as you say, you can feel heat, and when you touch somebody, put your hands on them, which you've done. You do that for your friends or whatever, and you work on the basis if somebody's there on the road with you and they need a bit of help or a bit of if they've got a pain somewhere, you can help relieve that pain.
Well, you can find it. I mean, it's not difficult, but all you have to do is think about it. You don't have to have somebody who's interested in, it's not to religion, or it's not healing in that respect. It's just identifying points of pain and then try and ask the person with the pain to do the job themselves. All you're doing is taking away the log jam to allow free healing. That's the way I think.
Makes a lot of sense. People should keep your mind open. Keep your mind open, and I think that's the key. So looking back, just
open too.
Absolutely, it was Chris. It's been an absolute delight. Just two final points. I mean, looking back, what advice would you give the 12-year-old Chris starting out in this profession?
It's funny because I wouldn't take 12-year-old. I've actually had 7-year-old Chris standing at the side of the stage in short trousers in all weathers, getting chilblains on his legs because that was the way it was done. We'd start off with cold baths first thing in the morning, and lots of little boys shivering and jumping at a cold bath. It was pretty brutal, to be honest, and lots of beatings. But I seen that little 7-year-old who's looking at me saying, "You're actually quite good at what you do," and I tell him it was a long road to get to where I am today, with lots and lots of bumps in the road. Lots of things went wrong. It's not an easy route, but when you go into a forest, you can either take the well-beaten track on the right. Lots of people have taken that. Or here's a machete, you cut your own route, and that is yours. That is yours. Whatever happens, things will go wrong, trees will fall down, you'll be unable to proceed any further. And if you're lucky, you will have people who will encourage you to keep going. And that eventually is your path. And that's the one you should stick to.
Brilliant. And finally, Christa Bergh, it's been an absolute delight talking to you. And thank you for spending so much time sharing so much glorious stuff. I can't wait for the tour. The album is brilliant, the little snippets that I've heard. But finally for today, I know you might even finish on a song if I persuade you nicely. Finally today, though, how would you, Christa Bergh, like to be remembered?
No different from, I guess, anybody, you or anybody down the street below. A legacy of some sort would be nice. Sometimes, as I said, I listen to my own records to sing along to improve the voice. And I think that's actually quite good, some of this stuff. I'm a weird kind of a person because I recorded 2 albums during the last few years called Footsteps, my favorite songs. And the reason I did that is because I spent too much time looking up the mountain. And I thought, stop here, look back down, look where you've come from, look at how difficult that road was, look at the good things that happened, look at the people who came with you. And for me, that was a very important thing to do, to be able to reflect on the difficulties and reflect to now, but also the future. You know, sometimes people say, what's your best song? I said, well, the next one, with a bit of luck. But it's hard to know. And with the new album, the Robin Hood album, I don't know how it will do. Nobody knows. I hope people enjoy it. I hope people enjoy listening to the book that I've put in, the audio book that I'm going to put with it. I've no idea. You can only tell afterwards whether it was a success. But for me, if I'm the quality control. If I like it, that's all. That's fine for me. So to be remembered, I don't know what they say. Small guy, hair, made some good music.
Small guy, hair, made some good music. I'll tell you what, you're a fantastic. It's so good to chat with you, Chris. Thank you so much. You mentioned that you might finish on a song. What do you fancy finishing on today? In amongst those 300 songs that we've done, you've got your guitar. It's not even Brother Richard's guitar.
A little burst of this one. The Tale of Robin Hood. Come near to me and I will tell the tale of Robin Hood. And though he was a noble man, was for the common good. A man of the people and a hero to us all. For he robbed from the rich and he gave it to the poor. Robbed from the rich and he gave it to the poor.
Absolutely sensational. I'm sorry I'm not a crowd of zillions of people, but for me, Christa Bergh, that was such a delight. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you very much, Andrew. A pleasure.
Take care. Bye-bye. So thank you again to Christa Bergh for being my very special guest. It's out on the 3rd of September, The Legend of Robin Hood. Live Life, Live Well is being released on the 27th of August, and get your tickets for that tour. Absolutely sensational. But for me for now, thank you very much for being my special audience for today, and thank you again to Chris. I look forward to seeing you next time. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the Andrew Eborn Show on all of the usual platforms. You can follow me at Andrew Eborn, at Octopus TV, and indeed, I will look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.